some snow. As GBH Radio's Mark Hers tells us, this comes as home heating prices are on the rise.
Price for a gallon of heating oil is bumping up towards $6 a gallon, almost double what it was last year. The State Department of Energy Resources estimates it'll take more than $3,500 to heat an average Massachusetts home this winter with oil, the most expensive option. Heating with electricity is estimated to have almost doubled to more than $1,100 for this season. Gas remains the cheapest option, with the smallest increase over last year, but it's still close to $1,000 this season on average, and that's a similar price for those with a wood stove. In Boston, I'm Mark Hers, GBH News 89.7.
And in the forecast, mostly sunny, mid-40s today, clouding up overnight tonight, low 42. We could see some rain in Boston, maybe a dusting of snow, as we said, in the higher elevations. It's 39 degrees outside our studios. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Amazon Business. From small business to big enterprise and everything in between, Amazon Business works to help simplify the supplies buying process. Learn more at amazonbusiness.com.
I am Margery Egan. You are listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live as we do every Tuesday and every Friday from the Boston Public Library in Copley Square, and we are streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News. Good morning.
Very nicely done, Margery.
Thank
How are you?
Thank you very much, Jim.
Nice to see you. So nearly every Trump-backed candidate who spouted election lies lost their midterm election in battleground states, most notably and recently Kari Lake losing the governorship last night of Arizona. We've talked a lot in the past few days about how this may turn down the temperature on extremism in our country, but what do you think? The number's 877-301-8970. Call or text. Is the outcome of the midterms, with Democrats holding control of the Senate and only a narrow House majority, which is probably minutes away from being declared, and extreme conspiracy theorists losing in high-profile races throughout the country, enough to make you confident that a return to sane traditional partisanship is near? Or is the fact that the extremist in chief, Donald Trump, is about to announce tonight likely that he'll run for president again, does that derail any confidence you have in the return to quasi-normalcy in our country? Call or text 877-301-8970. I have to say, of all the candidates, if I had to rate offensive on a scale of offensiveness, Kari Lake was right up there. Not only disparage at calling John McCain a loser after praising him as a hero not too long ago when he died, and also trashing election workers. One of my favorite moments, I know you saw this, she endorsed the opponent, yes, the Democratic opponent in Kari Lake's race, the governor-elect Hobbs, and to which the response from Lake at the time was, a Cheney anti-endorsement is the gift that keeps on giving. Well, Liz Cheney never responded until last night, until after the election was declared for Hobbs, not Lake, and she tweeted two words, "You're welcome," which I thought was terrific.
We all were big fans of Liz Cheney heading up the January 6th committee. But, you know, it's interesting what happened in Arizona. You know, previously, things had gotten so extreme in Arizona. Remember, they were dissing Cindy McCain, the widow of John McCain, who I think most people think if you spend 5 years as a prisoner of war in Vietnam, you are indeed a war hero. So he was dissed by President Trump when he was running for president. But you wonder whether that kind of thing was just too much for some of the people in Arizona, the whole normal versus nuts kind of strategy, which seems to have worked well for the Democrats.
You know, we're going to talk to John King in the 1 o'clock hour tonight, this afternoon, about what to expect from Donald Trump tonight, assuming this thing is not canceled. And there are no details at all.
You do wonder whether it's going to happen.
But who, other than J.D. Vance, we may be missing one person, what high-profile candidate for governor or Senate that he endorsed, one who can stand by him? I assume it's Don Jr., it'll be Kimberly Guilfoyle. Did you see she was photoshopped out of Ivanka's picture of the wedding of Tiffany, which is one of the great moments ever.
Well, so there is some talk that Ivanka and Jared are not that keen on showing up at Mar-a-Lago either.
Is that really true?
Yeah, well, I just saw a story about it. I mean, who knows? You know, sometimes it was not reported widely, let's put it that way.
But in any case, the Trump issue, I really, I'm not optimistic much about American politics. I was feeling pretty good until I remembered that Trump was declaring again tonight. And I think the question is, what kind of reception does he get? A lot of these cowardly Republicans, I'm sure you've seen on TV or read in the newspaper the last couple of days, are beginning to inch away without saying it. Some are saying it directly. Chris Christie, who used to be the guy, remember, it would hold his umbrella for him. I mean, talk about pathetic. The former governor of New Jersey, he said his time has passed. We got to move on. He was explicit. I think there was the guy who was at Cassidy, the Republican senator from Louisiana, who said we don't need a cult leader, which basically was a slap at Trump. I think a major moment for America, I don't mean to be my usual hyperbolic self, but I will, is not only what kind of reception Donald Trump gets tonight from the average Republican when they do some snap polls in the next couple of days, but secondly, how many Republicans are willing to say his time has come and gone? This could be a really major moment in the next day or so.
Well, I heard Maggie Haberman talking this morning on The Daily, my favorite podcast. She just wrote an extensive book about Donald Trump called Confidence Man, and she really did a great job. But she was saying that if he does announce tonight he's going to run again, he's not going to concede that there was any loss of support in him during the race. He's going to declare it a win. Somehow he's going to find a way to declare it a win, because that's what he's always done. He's called white, black, and blue, green, and gotten away with it. And why not continue in that mode tonight?
While people like Oz actually conceded pretty graciously into John Fetterman in Pennsylvania, Blake Masters, I believe, who lost to Kelly in Arizona, has not yet conceded. As far as I know, if anybody knows any differently among our colleagues, I don't think Katie Hobbs has conceded. She just tweeted out some nasty thing saying this is all BS last night, I assume meaning the election was stolen. So essentially our question is quite simple, and especially coming from me, are you feeling a little bit better about maybe the decline or the marketability of extremism in this country based on the results? And by the way, I'm focused on Kari Lake, not only because I embarrassed myself so horribly by saying she was going to be the next president of the United States in 2024. I may have been off just a little bit about that. But wouldn't you say that she was Trump's number one favorite in lots of ways? I mean, she was like I was going to say a mini Trump, but she's actually a lot smarter and more competent than he is. But she did every single thing about denialism, flipping positions on issues to appeal to the Trump crowd. She did everything Trump did, except in some ways a little better.
Also, Trump, one of the things that really helped him win and helps him continue is that he's been on television for years and years. So you get those television skills. She was an anchor in Arizona for years and years. You get the television skills. So she gets up in front of a crowd. She looks great. She's a good-looking woman. She's got these gorgeous dresses on. She can talk a dog off a meat wagon. It's the same kind of talk a dog off a meat wagon. Well, she can, and the same thing that Donald Trump could do. So that was very effective. It's almost as if you not only have to be good-looking these days to run for office, but you also have to be very glib and very quick and able to speak really, really well. And you see Mike Pence being interviewed by David Muir on ABC News, and Pence is not a telegenic kind of guy, and it almost seems as though...
Well, I would argue Donald Trump is not a telegenic kind of guy either.
Are you kidding? He's great on television.
No, I didn't say it wasn't great on television, but you say you got to be attractive. Speaking of Pence, can we stay on that before we take a break, and then we're going to get to your calls and texts in a second. Talk about cowardly. He gets all this praise for complying with the Constitution on January 6th. Okay, fine. He, in the David Muir interview, is willing to say, Donald Trump put my family and staff and friends at personal risk. And then he's asked the question, should Trump be president again, after saying that he essentially led an insurrection? The voters will decide that issue. How about no, Mike? How is no? Is that not good for you? I mean, it is. They're so scared of Donald Trump, and that's the only reason why my good feelings about the decline of the marketability of extremism is not quite as intense and positive as I might like it to be.
A texter thinks that Kari Lake is going to run as Trump's running mate.
That's not impossible, by the way. I mean, in all fairness, by the way, just for those who were mocking me correctly the other day, how many points did Barack Obama lose his first race for Congress by? I think it was 38 points.
I don't know, he got crushed.
Totally crushed.
Yeah.
And I think he did fairly well in later years. I'm not saying she's Barack Obama, but there's something there. In any case, By the way, as I mentioned this a couple of seconds ago, our colleagues just said her most recent tweet from Lake is Arizonans know BS when they see it, and that's why they rejected you, Carrie Lake. I guess the answer is that is true.
I guess she didn't think of that when she initially sent that tweet. Anyway, we're going to take your calls and texts on what you think about Trump announcing tonight, or maybe not announcing tonight if he backs out. Are you feeling a little bit better about Americans choosing a normal over nuts? 877-301.
Normal over nuts.
877-301-87. What's the number again?
I have no idea, Margaret.
301-8970
Very
is the
nicely
number.
done.
You can call us or text us, 877-301-8970. You are listening to Boston Public Radio, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library.
From the GBH Newsroom, priced out, the fight for housing in Massachusetts.
A lot of the new developers aren't building those 3, 4, 5-bedroom units. They're building 1-bedroom studio apartments. Where are the families going to go?
We will be downsizing from a 3-bedroom to a 2-bedroom with the 4 of us. It's going to run me about $625 more a month for less space.
Available now at gbhnews.org.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Swan Galleries with contemporary art at auction November 17th, featuring artists such as Keith Haring, Kehinde Wiley, Julie Meritu, and Jeff Koons. Catalog and bidding at swangalleries.com and on the Swan app. And City Year. By putting the leadership skills of AmeriCorps mentors to work in public school classrooms, City Year can help students become the people they want to be while building their academic and social strengths. cityyear.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. We're live at the Boston Public Library. Today we'll be back on Friday, as we usually are. We're talking about whether or not extremism is on the wane, or at least you believe it is, as a result of the midterm election outcomes. And even if you believe that, is it about to go back on the rise when, as I call him, the extremist in chief theoretically declares his candidacy for a third time tonight? By the way, Charlie Baker spoke about this. Charlie Baker was on with Jake Tapper on CNN. It's getting a lot of play,
Yeah, it is.
I should say. Not just
It was
here,
a
but around the country.
long interview in 2 parts. They paid
I know.
part of it between 4 and 5, then they went back between 5 and 6. Long interview, and Tapper came to the State House.
I
to
heard.
do the
I know.
interview. Yeah.
I saw that. So, in any case, here is a Baker offering his opinion to Tapper on why the Republicans failed to gain more ground during the midterms.
Well, I certainly think there's significant influence from the former president, and I think that influence probably hurt the party and hurt the party's chances on Election Day, not just here in Massachusetts and Maryland, but in many of those other battleground states. What voters want are candidates who are going to, and elected officials who are going to reach out, who are going to engage with the so-called other side, and who are going to take seriously this idea that you are supposed to try to represent and hear the voices of all of the people that you serve.
There he is, Charlie Baker, on national TV, and he doesn't do many of those national interviews.
Let's just pause for a moment. Most popular governor in America. I think a lot of people in Massachusetts are pretty happy with Charlie Baker. He's a moderate Republican, the kinds that actually used to win the presidency. I mean, there were moderate Republicans that won the presidency. George Bush Sr., I would say, was a moderate Republican that won the presidency. And wouldn't he be a real attractive candidate if we were in more normal versus not?
Oh, he'd be
times.
a very attractive candidate if Massachusetts was a country. But since it isn't a country, my understanding is I didn't see the second half of the interview where he was asked about why is the most popular governor in America not running for president. Baker was apparently honest enough to say exactly what we just said.
But moderate Republicans, a lot of them were fiscal conservatives and social liberals.
Yeah.
Bill Weld, that's what we've had here in
Well,
Massachusetts.
didn't George H.W. Bush flip on choice to run with Reagan? Am I not right about that? So I don't know how moderate he was.
He did flip on choice to run with Reagan,
yeah.
but he was a social liberal before he had to, bury his principles to run with Ronald Reagan. But anyway, Bill from Chelmsford. What do you think, Bill?
Hey, Bill, welcome.
Good morning. How are you both doing?
Excellent.
Thank you.
What's up?
I had a brief moment of ecstasy, knowing what happened and seeing some great returns from the Democratic people that were elected, and then reality sets in, and you see what DeSantis did down in Florida and Abbott did down in Texas. And my fear is this: we've got so much focus by the national and local media on Trump that we're missing the wolf behind the wall. And it's DeSantis. He's no different than Trump. In fact, he may be more radical. He has an immense ability to stand up and convince people. And there's enough people in the Republican Party that aren't MAGA Republicans that will support him. And I just think we're actually probably in a situation where he may convince a lot of the moderate independents and Democrats that he's a good choice. And I'm really actually more concerned about him than worried about Trump.
I've got good news for you, Bill. Marjorie's about to say for the 5th straight day why she thinks DeSantis is not marketable nationally. What's your answer to Bill?
Well, I think he's got a big problem because he's radically anti-gay. He did things that some people find really cruel, which is put people on an airplane and send them to Martha's Vineyard, a place they didn't want to go, even if you don't like the rates of immigration coming to the country. And he's less radical on abortion. He wants a 15-week ban. But based on the fact, except for in Texas, Bill, where you've got a good point, because Abbott signed that heartbeat bill, that so-called heartbeat bill in Texas, did not pay a price for that. So I'm not sure what the abortion vote was like in Texas. But again, nationally, I think DeSantis is going to have big trouble. And you know what else about DeSantis?
Bill, thanks for the call.
You know, Trump was unique. I mean, people waited, the classic line when he was running for president, you knew Trump was going to come on television. He was such a ratings magnet that CNN would have a picture of the empty podium waiting for him to get out there. And I must admit, I'd be standing there in the kitchen washing the dishes with my dish towel waiting for him to come on TV. That doesn't necessarily translate. That kind of magnetism
to
doesn't.
Somebody else.
Yes, it was the same thing like the Obama coalition. It was uniquely held by Barack Obama. It didn't transmit to somebody else because Barack Obama was a uniquely attractive candidate to a lot of people.
877-301-8970. We're doing a rare thing on the show. We're trying to be positive for 40 minutes. We don't do much of that. We want to know if you share our perspective that at least on the margins, extremism in this country and American politics took a hit over the last couple of weeks. And again, I want to reiterate, I think this Lake thing is totally huge, particularly huge, because she's so skillful and because she was probably... because she's so skillful. Let's go to Judah in Boston. Hey, Judah, welcome.
Hey, I'm a frequent listener, first-time caller.
Thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree with the points made by the previous caller around, we focus so much on Trump, but, the reality is that the positions that a lot of the Republicans who've been reelected were election deniers. They basically voted not to certify the election.
Correct.
Most of them got reelected to Congress. And a lot of the folks who were running for, say, Secretary of State in places like Nevada and Arizona, they lost, but they got like 48% of the vote. The other thing is I'm originally from Ohio, and, I think the way that some of these states have been gerrymandered, you have places like Cleveland, where I'm from originally, which is very blue, and people have basically no voice in the state because the state legislature, all the districts have been, gerrymandered, and so it becomes everything is controlled by one party, which to some extent we have in Massachusetts.
Not to some extent, to a total extent, but yeah.
Right, but if I had to choose, I'd rather be, so it's just...
Judah, I'm really glad you called because, when people talk about Florida and Texas, as that first caller does, Texas has been red, and there were some hopes with Beto O'Rourke, but they weren't real. Florida was a purple kind of experience that is now firmly red, and you added a state that I had forgotten. Ohio is a truly red state now with J.D. Vance.
Because Tim Ryan was a good candidate.
As the governor. I agree with you. I thought Tim Ryan was a terrific candidate, and he lost in a pretty serious kind of way. Judah, that was an excellent first call. Do it again. 877-301-8970. Do you read Tom from East Falmouth, who said, I'm rejoicing this morning since the red wave is now looking like a pink trickle. He's misspelled pink, and I thought the word was prink. And in Arizona, the lake is becoming a puddle. The question is, how long did you take, Tom, to compose that. It was quite fine.
Well, you know what I think is going to be interesting, too, to see what happens with the House. I mean, the Republicans are expected to win the House narrowly, I guess. The verb this morning was Kevin McCarthy was scrounging around for votes to make sure he does well in terms of getting that House speakership position. But the thing is, what happens? Do the people that are the election deniers and the Margery Boebert won out in Colorado.
Narrowly, yeah.
Narrowly. So Boebert in Colorado and Marjorie Taylor Greene, do these people kind of hijack the whole operation?
Well, my understanding is Taylor Greene, correct me if I'm wrong, somebody flipped yesterday, and after casting some doubt as to whether or not the nuts would support McCarthy, she said we have to. I believe she said we have to rally around McCarthy. For the speaker's chair. So I mean, the reality is on certain issues, he is going to have to cater to the extreme right in his own party. But as I said yesterday, we'll talk to John King about this too. The more I thought about it, obviously it'd be nice to have no election deniers in the majority, but a slim majority is going to limit his ability to move on a lot of issues because of either true nuts on the right or some few moderates, the Kinzinger types, who aren't going to play along, you know? So 877-301-8970. Brendan, you're in Connecticut. You're on Boston Public Radio. Thank you for your call. Hi.
Hey, Jim and Margery. Thanks for taking my call.
Thank you.
I hate to rain on the parade here, and I, too, am very heartened by what happened last week. I think it is we're going to rain on it, by what happened and the kind of pushback against extremism. What I'm really worried about is that they're going to re-gear and kind of put the same old crazy in a shiny new package that's a little bit more amenable to the public. I think DeSantis is very much in that vein. And I just worry that, people are going to kind of, as much as the personality kind of conflicts maybe start to resolve in an optimistic scenario, the same policies will be there, and they'll be touted by candidates that are just much more kind of nice on the surface, but really aren't.
I think that's a very valid point. And the thing that I have to say worries me, Margery and I were talking about this before, I think there are going to be a lot of Republicans running for the nomination. And while some people are celebrating that because they're not Donald Trump, it seems to me if you do simple math, the greater the number of Republicans challenging Trump, the lower the percentage of the vote he needs to get in the Republican primaries to be the nominee. And I hope we're not going to get any calls or hear from any experts who believe that it's a good way for the Democrats to go, as they did in some of the races last week, and endorse the most, or at least advocate for the most extreme Republican with this theory that Trump is the easiest person to beat. I don't think you ever take a chance with somebody who's an insurrectionist like Donald Trump, even if you believe the polls suggest that a Democrat could beat him. Brendan, I think you're right to a great degree. Thank you much for your call. We really appreciate it.
You know what? I wonder whether all of this will make it possible for Liz Cheney to make it into a few debates.
Well, she can make it in a debate. She declares. She doesn't have to. All you do is you declare you're a Republican.
Yeah, but don't sometimes you get X'd out if you're not have a certain amount.
Well, I think in the early ones she'd be.
I mean, I would just love that. That would be just great because she's so smart and quick on her feet and very impressive, like her father, who unfortunately lied us into Iraq.
Yeah, but by the way, how are you going to feel about Liz Cheney after a full debate where in every issue other than democracy, she has a different position from what you have?
Well, I would
absolutely everything.
I would never vote for her in a million years, and I'm not sure she could get anywhere nationwide. But I'm just saying I'd love to see her in a debate because look at what happened in the debates before, with Trump. It was little Marco and Lying Cruz and low energy Bush, and this ability to belittle people and for it to be effective. Because again, he's got great television skills. I don't know that Trump could intimidate or outgun her the way he outgunned other people.
Marjorie Taylor Greene, I mean, when someone as insane as she is takes a totally sane position, it is cause for worry. She argued against any challenge to Kevin McCarthy as Speaker. Quote, I actually think that's a bad strategy when we're looking at having a razor-thin majority with potentially 219. You need 218. We're talking about one vote. So when she comes into line, it would at least suggest to me that the Republicans will be much more strategic in terms of a lot of decisions, including who they pick for Speaker, than some Democrats are hoping. 877-301-8970.
Nina on the road. Thank you for calling.
Hey, Nina.
Hi. Yes, Jim, this is actually a request. About a month ago, either on Greater Boston or you and Margery on this show, had Richie Neal and the other big cheese who represents Massachusetts in the House. They've been around a long time. And this was well before the red wave turned into a red dribble.
Yeah.
But Richie Neal kind of chuckled. And he said, look, we've been around a really long time. We know how things operate. We have ways of gumming up the work. I wonder if you could have him back, because I would, for one, though I'm feeling much better about democracy, would like to hear how, without giving things away, how that might work. Because I think, that is maybe a saving grace. That slim majority with the crazy people exacting all kinds of concessions from McCarthy isn't going to work very well. But we also have these vets who know something about how further quietly to gum up the works because they know how the government works.
We'd be happy to have Neal back, and I assume people know he's the chair of the Ways and Means Committee. He will not be the chair come January. But if you argue that there's some veteran Democrats who know how to use your term, gum up the works, I think most people, even those who hate what she stands for, think that Nancy Pelosi is the most skillful a speaker maybe in the history of the United States. So if anybody has the ability to make Kevin McCarthy and his minions have a hard time, I would assume it's her, and he's part of her team. You're right, Nina. We'll try to get him back, so stay tuned. Thank you for the call.
Wasn't she going to retire in 2022?
Well, she was going to retire as Speaker, but now she doesn't have to retire as Speaker because she's not going to be Speaker. The question is, does she resign her seat? And it appears to be unclear. Was she willing to lead the minority, or is she going to step down? I don't think people know.
A lot of the texters are very concerned that, Democrats may have prevailed in some races. There was a nut versus normal kind of, and the normal prevailed. But
is that your expression, nut versus normal? Is that where I love that.
I think I must have heard it someplace else.
Nut versus normal.
I must have stolen it from somebody, I don't remember who. But anyway, they're very concerned about the margins being so thin and that the races were so close, and that Kari Lake came very, very close to winning out in Arizona. And then Tony from Boston is
Can I respond to that? It troubles me too. Remember the guy that ran in Alabama and everybody celebrated that Doug Jones, the Democrat, beat him one election cycle ago?
Yeah.
And the Republican was hanging out at malls,
picking up
hitting
teenagers.
on young teenage girls. And my response to that was the same. The guy got 40, whatever he got, percentage of the Roy Moore, thank you, Aiden, for reminding me. Having said that, a win is a win. Just ask Al Gore if a close vote matters as much as a... So it concerns me too, but the bottom line is, with the exception of Vance, and we may be missing one other, all the election deniers, all the anti-democracy people, all the extremists that were running for high office that were endorsed by Donald Trump lost, which is really a wonderful chastening moment.
It'll be interesting to see what J.D. Vance does now that he's actually going to be the senator, because, of course, he couldn't stand Trump, right? He did a complete 180.
Did he compare him to Hitler as recently as a year or so ago, or a Nazi or something?
He was no fan, let's put it this way. So now that he's got what he wants, he's got the Senate seat, maybe he returns to his previous positions, becomes a little bit less extreme.
Well, weren't you the one who told me on the final weekend, actually, when Trump went to campaign with Vance, that he gave a sort of an underhanded slap to Vance? What did he say?
Well, because he said he kissed his butt.
Oh, that Vance kissed his butt.
Using another word, yeah.
How'd you like to do that, by the way?
I would not. Let
me tell you something.
See that picture of Trump playing tennis that lots of people have on their Twitter handle? It's pretty...
Let's be kind, you know what I mean? We have time
for... It's a close-up of the president's bus.
Yeah, that's really a picture I'd like to see quite regularly.
Ron and Seabrook, thank you for calling.
Hey, Ron.
Hi, thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Hey, I saw that interview with Charlie Baker.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone could have put a spin on the underperformance of his own party that was more hopeful for both sides to listen to. Boy, is he going to be missed. The other thing I wanted to say.
Hold on, Ron. Why did you think it was hopeful for both for his party?
Because he made the point that it's the extremism that failed, not the party. And
but the extremism is the party. I mean, we've had this discussion with Baker every month that he's kind enough to join us. The Republican Party that he hopes to rejuvenate, with all due respect to the governor, doesn't exist. It doesn't even exist in Massachusetts, much less other parts of the country, Ron. So By the way, our staff has put up photographs of Donald Trump from behind, which is really unkind.
I mean, I think Ron...
I'm sorry, Ron. Go ahead.
Well, I thought that you could stomach having your party underperform if you believe that it only did so because too many of the candidates were extreme.
Yep.
So it's a step toward people working, both sides working together, and he phrased that better than I did. But that was very
but Ron,
for people to hear, I think.
But one of the problems, I think, for the Republican Party, beyond the election deniers and the extremists, is that they're on the wrong side of almost everything that American people are for, whether it's guns, whether it's health care, whether it's tax cuts for middle-class people as opposed to billionaires, they're the wrong side on abortion, they're the wrong side on climate, they're the wrong side on all these issues.
Whether it's obeying the actual votes of the people in a district.
Yeah, so I think that's one of the issues too. Is so what they've done very cleverly is distract people with all these wedge issues like gay stuff and transgender stuff, and they thought abortion was going to work for them. Obviously, it didn't work for them. So you know what I mean? I think they got to have a little bit more helpful. I mean, everybody wants to get lower prescription drug prices, right? Everybody wants to have some reasonable kind of health care in this country, and the Republicans are like on the wrong side of that.
Hey, Ron, thank you for the call, though. We appreciate it. We got to go. My apologies, Ron. Thank you very much for calling in.
Okay, up next, we're going to talk with Trenni Casey on Mike Tyson's marijuana edibles that are shaped like the ear of, what's his first name, Evander Holyfield? Yeah, the fighter whose ear he bit off. NBC Sports Boston, Trenni Casey. Up next, you're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library.
Next time on The World, what happens after Russian troops withdraw from a Ukrainian city? Our reporter takes us to a place that was liberated 2 months ago. Authorities have mostly restored electricity and water, but some areas remain off limits.
There could be mines here that the Russians planted before they left.
Our report from Izium, northern Ukraine. It's on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you. And H&H, the Handel and Haydn Society, performing Handel's Messiah with its triumphant Hallelujah Chorus, November 25th, 26th, and 27th at Symphony Hall. Tickets at handelandhaydn.org. And the University of New England in Maine, preparing students to do their part to support healthy people, healthy communities, and a healthy planet. The University of New England. What's your part? une.edu.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Margery, live at the Boston Public Library, streaming online, youtube.com/GBH News. We're joined now by NBC Sports Boston anchor and reporter Trenni Casey. She's also a BPR contributor. Hey there, Trenni.
Hi, guys.
Hey, great to see you, Trenni. So before we talk about...
serious stuff?
No, we're going to, before we talk about serious stuff, apparently Mike Tyson and Evander Holyfield are going into the marijuana business together, and they've decided it would be quite cute to have kind of Mike Bites, which would be a line of pot gummies shaped like the ear that Mike Tyson took a bite out of. That would have been Holyfield's ear. But anyway, before we get to all that, let's go back in time to the sound during Mike Tyson's infamous ear bite back in 1997.
It looked as if Tyson bared his teeth at one stage in the exchange.
Yes,
bit his ear.
He bit his ear. That's what Holyfield was in a lot of pain from that. You see the blood on the ear. That was definitely a bite.
Now, what is the referee going to do about that?
Excellent question.
Apparently,
can I just say that English and Irish accents make everything better? I would watch anything in an English and Irish accent.
I know, it's
French
so true.
isn't bad either.
Yeah, yes.
But apparently, time heals all wounds, Trenni, because
so
Mike Tyson is now teaming up, as I said, to launch this limited edition marijuana edible under the cannabis brand, and it's going to be shaped like the ear. Here's the discussion about that.
What is this? I got you your ear. No, it's not. This ain't my ear. Yes, it is. Cherry pie punch filling. My ears don't taste like cherry pie. Yes, they do. I just don't. Yes, they do. Man, they don't. Yes, they do. No, I don't. Yes, they do. Why I ate your ear, I should know. Well, you're right.
Remember the optimism I felt 10 minutes ago about the direction of this country? Forget about that. By the way, if it's not obvious, that was Holyfield and Tyson doing the cannabis spot, Margery.
Yes, it was.
So I see this as optimism. I see this as two guys
well, that's a very good point.
Who went through something and came together, and they both matured and grew up. And, you know, Mike Tyson, who has done a lot of bad things, has taken a look sort of at his life and said, hey, if I would have had cannabis, which a lot of people say this, right? If I would have had something to help me deal in a more natural way with my pain, instead of dealing with opioids, like over-the-counter prescription drugs and alcohol, maybe I would have been able to control myself a little bit better. And so the two of them have mended fences, and they've come together and they've started a business together, even after one bit off the other's ear. And so the gummies are going to be like shaped, and they're called like Heary, or like what is the name of it, Margery?
Mike's Bits or something like this.
Holy Ear.
Holy Ear, that's what it is. Holy Eerie, or something like that. So I mean, you know, they're having fun with it. Obviously, they're going to make probably a ton of money off of it. But cannabis is sort of where it's at, and it's brought them together. So, Jim, I see this as a positive thing, once again, of people crossing aisles, coming together, and working together.
Well, actually, then in that spirit, then maybe if he had been smoking marijuana, he wouldn't be a convicted rapist who went to jail in Indiana.
I know.
Which is exactly where he belonged.
Isn't that
we interviewed him a few years ago, by the way, so I shouldn't, I'm acting like we're pure, and we talked to Mike Tyson on the phone.
It's hard, though, right? Because, you know, my memories, Mike Tyson was big in the 80s. When I was young, and so that's sort of how I knew him. And then the second wave of Mike Tyson that I sort of grew up knowing was Mike Tyson in the Hangover movies.
Yeah.
You know, where he's this lovable, funny guy who's got the pet tiger and the suite in Vegas, and he's funny and he's gregarious. We as a society in media and entertainment and sports tend to take these guys who have done very bad things, and we allow them to rehab regardless of what they've done.
Like some of them can run for president 3 times too.
Yeah.
Like those kind. You know, by the way, one of the things I was laughing at was not you. One of the things I love, and by the way, I have the same disease that Margery does. I just mentioned Mike Tyson was on our show, and Margery looks at me. He was?
Yeah, I don't remember.
Was that not what exactly?
I do not remember.
Yeah, we don't know who was on yesterday, much less years ago.
I don't know what I had for breakfast.
Exactly.
So Trenni from something.
Trenni Casey too.
Trenni Casey, sorry.
It's okay. It's going to take years.
Yeah, it's going to take years. That's true, especially for me. Could be decades. Trenni Casey. Speaking of something that's more serious, this story about female college athletes being pressured to lose weight. Way down in this story about how terrible this is, it says that a lot of them, when they lose weight, they don't even perform better.
They don't. Because think about it, Margery. So there was a story in the New York Times, and it focused specifically on college cross-country and track and field, female track and field runners. And I guess I shouldn't be surprised that this is still an issue, despite as it is, because I feel like in the last few years, there have been some very prominent professional runners who have come out and they've talked specifically about being part of the Nike program, right? And running under Alberto Salazar, who has since been banned because he was also accused and convicted of giving his athletes performance-enhancing drugs. But a number of those athletes came out afterwards and talked about the immense pressure on them to lose massive amounts of weight and to be so small. Because listen, true, fair or unfair, when I'm lighter, I run faster, right? But I also get injured more. So a lot of these athletes, and when you get to a certain point where I know what my healthy running weight is, right? I can stay healthy, run good times. And obviously I'm not a professional or collegiate athlete, but I think, we're all women. We all sort of, we all experience a lot of the same things. But I also know when I get too small, I tend to get injured, but also you don't have the fuel, like the literal fuel to get your run going. And so a lot of these women lose such immense amounts of weight and body fat that they don't have the energy to run fast, that they have lost their power. I will say, on a positive note, and it wasn't covered in this story, there is a real movement among professional runners, which I've seen recently a lot on social media, really encouraging more positive body image, but also weightlifting shifting and not falling into this trap that smaller is better. And I think that's just, it's going to take a while though, because there's this idea in the minds of people that the smaller you are, the fitter you are, and the more athletic you are.
You know, there are two angles to the story. One, the one you and Margery are talking about. The other angle is there a week that passes where the three of us are not talking about some form of abuse of
Female
women
athletes?
athletes? Whether it's the National Women's Soccer League, well, I mean, I can go down the list, all the gymnasts and former Dr. Nasser. It's just another, the way these women are treated when you listen to how their coaches talk to them and how they verbally abuse them about the size of their bodies. And by the way, these are not people who are overweight.
Oh, no,
these people who are just people who, in the minds of the coaches, should weigh less. It's grotesque.
It shouldn't be about, my issue, like BMI and weight is not always, it's not ever, almost ever a healthy, always like an accurate indicator of how healthy you are, right? Like, listen, body fat percentage, I don't know, honestly, I'm not a physiologist, so I don't know what is, but I have to imagine it's a combination of like when I go see my trainer, we do sort of like a fitness assessment, we check out like my bone density, the ratio of fat to muscle weight, like what is my muscle gain, like those types of things. So I might weigh more, but I might be leaner or fitter because I have more muscle, and they don't focus on these things. But I feel like there is a groundswell of women in particular, someone like Molly Seidel, who is talked really openly about her she has eating disorders. She has an eating disorder because she spent her whole life having coaches tell her she has to be smaller, faster. And I actually saw, I don't know if you guys watched the New York City Marathon. You probably didn't. It's probably not what you want to do on a Sunday morning. But there was a woman.
It was hot.
It was very warm, but there was a professional runner who recently gave birth, like maybe a year and a half ago, she gave birth to her first child. And I remember watching it at brunch with a friend of mine, and I said, I love that she doesn't have a perfect body, that she has sort of whatever happens to your stomach when you have a baby, there was like some excess skin and all these things, but she ran in her singlet, her sports bra and her pants, and it didn't matter. And we saw a couple other runners. Nell Rojas is a professional runner who she looks, compared to all the other runners, she looks quote unquote big. She's not big in any way, shape, or form, but she preaches healthy eating, weightlifting, not taking all of this weight off of, and it's nice to see those different types of body types starting to come into the sport of running.
I want to say a second time, and I'm not disagreeing with anything you're saying, except even if it turns out you were wrong, and that these coaches were right about weight and BMI or whatever it is, it's the abusive way in which they impart this information, and these women are so disposable. It's really, it's horrible, and I hope there are consequences.
And they put them on display, and they put them. I mean, that's the other problem, right? Listen, you want to run aerodynamically when you're running that fast. You don't want a shirt that's going to catch the wind. That will literally slow you down by seconds, which could be the difference of winning and losing. So you have to wear all these tiny little outfits, and so there's this idea of it's just women deal with so many body issues already, and this just exacerbates them. Why are you laughing?
I'm laughing because when you talk about these tiny little outfits, Margery and I have talked about this about 1,000 times. When Margery was still at the Boston Herald when we started doing a radio show together, two women volleyball players had a match, U.S. players. They were not the Olympic champions, the great ones.
Oh, you mean
in Quincy.
The beach volleyball.
Beach volleyball,
That's
I'm sorry. And they went in Quincy, and there were 5,000. It was a packed stadium, and they're basically naked.
They're wearing bikinis.
The men who were competing at the same stadium 2 weeks later, who were international champions, it was like Margery and me in the stands. We didn't go, but it is... Go ahead.
No, not to get too off topic, but there was another article in the New York Times recently that talked about how this name, image, and likeness.
Yeah, I saw that.
Which has now once again sort of resurrected the sort of sexualization of female athletes, because the way a lot of
you can sell it now in college.
You can sell it in college, so you can put your singlet on and you can take all these Instagram pictures of your six-pack abs and your big muscles, and you use that and it's like a double-edged sword. Why shouldn't those women be able to make money when they can, when they're 18, 19, 20 years old, they might make 6 figures. They might make 7 figures.
I'm not supposed to say this.
But at the same time, it's what kind of message are we sending that women, that the only way that we can monetize what we do is through our bodies?
Well, it's not just women, because Margery told me not to say this, but the next Smug Mug #4 coming out.
Are you going to wear a Speedo?
I'm in a Speedo, yes. It's actually should be huge. Okay, so can we move on to something that aggravates me? I don't know if I can say even more, but I think even more. I wish I was a World Cup fan, I could say I'm not going to watch the World Cup, even though I'm a World Cup fan, which I'm not. I'm not a big international soccer kind of person. The notion that they are going to Qatar with the level, I mean, no, it's not just Qatar. You don't have to email us. We know what happened in Russia. We know Beijing, all these kinds of things, where there is such a gross disregard for basic human rights, criminality if you're LGBTQ, and on. We go down this list. This is all about the money. This is only because they're willing to spend, I think it was $200 billion to build stadiums that didn't exist, so that FIFA and all those corrupt souls that run FIFA could get swag bags in Qatar, right?
And so they can go stay at the fanciest hotels in Qatar, and they'll be able to probably drink alcohol in their little ivory towers and have a great time, whereas your fans are being offered a $400 a night storage box.
Literally,
it looks like a shipping container. I think it has a bathroom in it. I'm not sure, but it's $400. We should also point out that
starting next week, right, or something like that.
Yeah, it starts Sunday. So the first match is Qatar versus, and I forget who they're playing, but it's the home team who's playing on Sunday, and then all the other matches begin on Monday. So like Team USA plays Monday afternoon at 2:00. They take on Wales. They're in Group B. But the other thing, so they pay all this money, Margery, to get the World Cup in Qatar. I think. I thought it was Qatar. That's what they said on my flight. I actually flew Qatar Airways.
Both ways. I've heard it both ways.
Yeah. So either way, Qatar, however you say it. Normally the World Cup is held in the summer. It is normally held in the summer, but it is too hot. So they shifted the entire World Cup, which also, by the way, interrupts international soccer play. Like, we're in the middle of just like Premier League soccer right now. So they're taking a break similar to what the NHL does every 4 years, where they're taking a break, but they shouldn't have to. Just don't put the World Cup in a country where it's so blazing hot that you can't play when it's supposed to happen.
We should just talk about some of the rules over there.
Oh my God, your insanity.
Laws. Well, drinking too much or drinking at all, swearing, taking photos, and even having sex could all land people in jail. They still have capital punishment, including flogging and stoning, although they haven't stoned anybody.
They said they haven't stoned anyone, they flogged anyone
for quite a while. They haven't stoned anybody in quite a while. That's
by the way, the having sex thing applies to couples who happen not to be married.
That's
if they are together, they can't have sex while they're in
premarital sex outside marriage is illegal. So couples who book hotel rooms together are already in violation of the law if they're not married. Homosexuality is unlawful. And taking photos without permission, flirting, swearing, or arguing could also land
one of my colleagues at Telemundo is actually going over to cover similar like what I do for the Olympics. He's been borrowed by Telemundo to be one of like the national guys to cover, and he said that we are just going to take every precaution. Like, they have had multiple training sessions on what not to do there and how to be careful. He's like, we aren't supposed to take pictures of anything while we're there. Like, we have to be very careful if anyone wants to have any sort of like alcohol, it has to be in an approved area, and if you leave that area and they think that you're intoxicated, like if somebody, like say you bump into someone and you've had a couple of beers, right? Maybe you're not even drunk, but you bump into someone and that Qatari is mad because they don't want you there, and then they go complain to the police, you could get arrested for public intoxication, and goodness only knows what's going to happen to you there. Now,
6-month prison sentence.
Some think obviously that they won't enforce these rules, that they want to appear to be this welcoming, modern country who's, catching up at the times.
Yeah, Brittany Griner's not going to jail in Russia either.
But we don't. But who knows? I can tell you this much. I would go if they would have offered me to go for work, which they wouldn't because I don't know anything about soccer. But had they, I would have gone just because I think it's always an interesting experience. But I wouldn't go as a fan. I would not pay for this experience.
So speaking of the no sex thing, which obviously is what Margery focused on, not surprisingly. How many condoms did they hand out at the Olympics? We talked about this with you. What was the last Olympics you were at?
I didn't go to Beijing because my mom was sick, so Japan.
Japan. And was that the place, or was it Beijing with like 400,000 condoms?
No,
Where was that?
it was. I mean, there's always a ton of condoms.
But not
at the
here,
Olympics.
I don't think.
No. But that's also like, I mean, let's be honest, that's also like a little dangerous. Like, at least the Olympics recognizes that it's a bunch of fit, single, young, hopped up 18 to 35-year-olds.
No?
Exactly. Like, here, we don't want any extra. We already had COVID going around. We don't want anything else being passed around, They're like in fish bowls. I can't imagine that will happen.
Okay, so for the people who care about this, could you tell us what the prospects of the American team are?
I would say they're not. I would say they're not great.
Didn't they miss the last qualifying for last World Cup?
They did qualify at least, but they didn't qualify in wins losses. They qualified on like goal differential, like they'd scored enough goals to qualify. The crazy thing is, this is like the youngest, most talented team the Team USA has had in a really long time. They've got a number of guys who play at an elite level. For European teams, for many in the Premier League in England. Matt Turner, who used to play for the Revolution, who's now he's the goalie for Arsenal. He's going to be the goalie for Team USA, which is it's a wonderful storyline to watch. But the problem is, and listen, again, I'm no soccer aficionado, and if my producer is listening right now, Dave Trubin, please text me and tell me if I'm wrong about this. But from what I understand, their head coach, Greg Berhalter, is sort of like a system guy. And you can't really implement a system when you only get to work out together. Like, most of these players haven't had a chance to practice together because they're all playing for their European teams. So this timeline has sort of screwed things up. They could surprise people. I've seen predictions that they get to the quarterfinals as much as I've seen predictions that they'll get knocked out in group play and they won't even advance at all.
Do you think they'll make it to the quarterfinals, Margery?
Well, I don't know, but I am wondering how much
I mean, they've got
pressure.
it tough. They've got Wales, Iran, and
England.
England are all in their group.
But how much talk was there about the Americans not even going because of the politics of Qatar?
Are you kidding?
None.
No one even considered it.
No.
I mean, other than Jimmy Carter and Russia, when have we ever not gone to an international?
The only team I think that I read that sort of has spoken out against, and that's the other thing, when you're there, you cannot speak out against the regime, whatever it is, the regime,
you can,
the
but
government.
you're never leaving
You can,
Qatar.
but you'll never leave. Like, you can't.
Well,
Like, you have to be very
careful. There's been a huge amount of talk, obviously, about Gulf and Saudi Arabia. So, I mean, there are differences, but they're not.
I mean, Iran is in their group play. I mean, look what's going on there right now, where they're threatening to execute 15,000 protesters, many of them teenagers and women. And it's not like FIFA saying, "Oh, hey, you know what? You can't compete anymore because of your human rights violations." Like, is FIFA going to do that? I can't even believe the Olympics does that sometimes, because they certainly don't stand on the grounds of high morality.
Yeah, I mentioned this before about 400 times, and it's a little bit old. One of the great international experts on the financing of Olympics and World Cup is Zimbalist. Is it Andrew Zimbalist?
Andrew Zimbalist up at Smith.
He's an economist at Smith. He's been on our show. He wrote, and he was part of the effort to stop the Olympics here, thank goodness, in 2024. Obviously with Chris Dempsey, who led the No to Boston, or whatever it's called. He wrote a fabulous book that is totally readable, even for those of us who don't understand economics, about how corrupt and bankrupting this is for democratic countries, which is why the Qatars and the Russias and the Chinas are getting so many of these Olympic games and FIFA World Cup tournaments.
Well, we talked at the time about maybe the solution would be to have the Olympics, Summer Olympics in the same place all the time, the Winter Olympics in the same place all the time. So you
go back to Greece. I mean, isn't that what a lot of people say? Let them be in Greece where they started.
I love the idea of having them in set places. I mean, listen, as someone who loves to travel, I love getting to go to different places. But
you can still travel, you know.
But for the economics of it. But you could have host countries, like a country host it, right? Like, you could maybe pay a much smaller amount to sort of be the, like, you know, you go to Gillette Stadium and you walk in the Bank of America entrance or something. It could basically be like that. You know, the Winter Olympics sponsored by the United States, the Winter Olympics sponsored by, you know, France or something. And that way, and it could only be in one spot, and you could still highlight the culture of those countries. But that's never happening, because that just doesn't bring in enough money.
Well, we're glad you're not going. I'm sorry that you're not for your sake, but I'm glad you're not for us.
As a woman, I think it's probably
better to stay here.
Yeah, I would be a nervous wreck from the time I got there to the time I left, thinking they might plan something on me or do something.
You're a nervous wreck here.
I'm a nervous wreck here. That's true, here in the city of Boston.
Because Jim probably planted something in your side.
Maybe I did, maybe I didn't.
I wouldn't put it past him. Let's face it. Okay, we've been speaking with NBC Sports' Trenni Casey. She's an anchor reporter and a BPR contributor. Up next, RSV cases are spiking this year. We're going to talk to Dr. Katherine Gergen Barnett about this and other health matters. You can call her at 877-301-8970. This is Boston Public Radio at the Boston Public Library.
You're listening to Boston Public Radio with Jim Braude and Margery Egan. Just ahead, more smart conversation about what's going on in our community. That's right after an NPR news break, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you. And Comcast Business, providing technology solutions for your starting or growing small business, including internet, phone, and Comcast Business Security Edge. Comcast Business, powering possibilities. Restrictions apply, actual speeds vary. For 444 days, the world watched as 52 Americans were held hostage at the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. Witness firsthand accounts on Part 2 of Taken Hostage, an American Experience special, tonight at 9 on GBH2.
Trusted. Local. News. This is 89.7 WGBH, WGBH HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. Boston's local NPR.
Ahead on Boston Public Radio, we're live at the Boston Public Library. The respiratory disease, RSV, mostly affects young kids, and in most cases registers as a bad cold with some wheezing, but not all cases. And a recent surge pushing the emergency rooms to the limits. Boston Medical Center's Dr. Katherine Gergen Barnett will join us to talk about what parents can do to keep their kids safe and healthy, both physically and mentally. Got questions? Give us a call or text. 877-301-8970.
Then is retired federal Judge Nancy Gertner on the latest out of the Supreme Court and the DOJ's investigation into classified documents that former President Trump hoarded at Mar-a-Lago. We've also got an arts and culture roundup with GBH's own Jared Bowen and CNN's John King on the chaos that's ahead of us in Washington, D.C. All that ahead, Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Congress is back this week for a busy lame duck session. NPR's Claudia Grisales reports today House Republicans will vote behind closed doors on their choice for Speaker.
House Republicans are one win away from taking the majority and taking the gavel from Speaker Nancy Pelosi. House GOP leader Kevin McCarthy told reporters he's optimistic he'll take on the role next.
It's going to be a tight majority, so everyone's going to have to work together.
McCarthy added that his conference will be successful as a team, but defeated as individuals if they don't work well together. While a likely majority of his conference supports him to become Speaker for closed-door leadership elections, McCarthy does not have a majority of the House chamber needed in a floor vote set for next year. Claudia Grisales, NPR News, Washington.
Former President Donald Trump has not yet confirmed his plans for 2024, but NPR's Giles Snyder reports that could change tonight.
The former president has yet to announce his plans publicly, but he has repeatedly telegraphed another run for the presidency. And last week he said he would have a very big announcement at Mar-a-Lago on November 15th. But that was before the midterms failed to produce a red wave. Some Republicans are blaming Trump for backing candidates who went on to lose their races.
NPR's Giles Snyder reporting. Classes and other academic activities at the University of Virginia are canceled today, and flags are lowered to half staff in honor of the 3 people killed and 2 others injured in Sunday night's shooting at UVA's Charlottesville campus. The slain victims were members of the school's football team. The alleged gunman, a former football player, identified as Christopher Darnell Jones Jr. He's in custody and has been charged in connection with the mass shooting. He's accused of opening fire on a bus filled with students after they returned to campus from a field trip to Washington, D.C. The motive still under investigation. Ukrainian military officials say Russian troops are withdrawing even further in the Kherson region. NPR's Jason Bobian reports Moscow's forces appear to be moving deeper into Russian-controlled territory east of the Dnieper River.
Just days after retreating out of the city of Kherson, Russian troops are setting up positions 10 miles east of the Dnieper River, apparently to stay out of Ukrainian artillery range, according to Ukraine's Southern Command. Last week, Russia completed the withdrawal of 30,000 soldiers from the west bank of the Dnieper. There was concern in Kyiv that Russia's forces might dig in on the east bank of the river and pound Kherson city with mortar shells. But according to Ukrainian military sources, the Russians are moving deeper into Russian-controlled parts of the territory. Kherson was the only regional capital Russia's military had captured since the start of the invasion in February. Jason Bobian, NPR News, Odessa, Ukraine.
This is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro in Brookline today. State Senator Susan Moran says she's disappointed and shocked at Governor Charlie Baker's veto of a measure that she sponsored related to the Pilgrim Nuclear Power Station. It could have created a commission to study the potential release of radioactive water.
We have been in close contact with the governor's administration on the language that we had in our amendment. And at no time did the administration or anyone from the governor's office red flag or have any concerns about the amendment.
The governor vetoed the Pilgrim Nuclear Amendment while signing most of the economic development package into law. Moran says that while Governor-elect Maura Healey could look at the issue more favorably, supporters hope to override the veto before she takes office. Well, the Boston Globe has announced that it found its next editor-in-chief. Her name, Nancy Barnes, and is currently the head of news at National Public Radio. In February, the Globe announced that current editor and occasional GBH guest Brian McGorry would be stepping down. Barnes has also led newsrooms in Houston and Minneapolis. And news that's a little closer to home after 50 years in the news business here in Boston, veteran GBH News political editor Peter Kadzis also is heading into retirement. For 25 of those years, Peter was editor of the Boston Phoenix newspaper. Sometime by the end of January, Peter will become a contributing editor for GBH, giving up his day-to-day duties. And just a side note, I was lucky enough to work with Peter side by side for 33 of his 50 years in this business. He taught me a lot. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include EBSCO, committed to providing researchers with reliable, relevant online research databases, including Academic Search Ultimate and Business Source Ultimate. More at ebsco.com.
It's Jim Browdy. I am Margery Egan. You're listening to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, and we are streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News.
We should also say, I didn't know it was public, or we would have said something at 11 o'clock. Henry just mentioned that Peter Kadzis, who you've known a lot longer than I have. Obviously, I knew of him for decades. Is leaving GBH sometime in January, and from his days at the Phoenix to his days here at GBH, where they were really lucky to get him after the Phoenix, he is quite an amazing news person and quite a loss.
He's a great journalist, great Boston accent. You've probably seen him doing the Scrum with Adam Riley. He's a Dorchester kid, and you could tell he's from Dorchester. He used to live on the 3rd floor of my house.
I know that.
Like on a mattress surrounded by stacks of newspapers and books. He would come down every morning looking like $1 million when he went out to the office. So there you go. He'll be missed. He's a great journalist. I can't believe he's retiring.
Congratulations and best of luck, Peter. So since the start of October, Massachusetts hospitals have been dealing with an expansion of RSV cases, a common respiratory illness among kids with symptoms usually similar to a regular cold. But pediatric emergency departments are at capacity with children struggling to breathe from the illness, some, I should say, due in part to years of masking to protect from COVID-19, obviously affecting their immune systems. Joining us now to discuss this, how kids overall are doing, both in their bodies and in their minds, and to take your calls and questions on. We're also going to try to tie up some loose ends on COVID, is Dr. Katherine Gergen Barnett. She's the Vice Chair of Primary Care Innovation and Transformation at Boston Medical Center, Clinical Associate Professor at Boston University Medical School, and she'll take your calls in a few minutes too and text at 877-301-8970. Doctor, it's good to see you.
So wonderful to see you both again.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for coming in, Doctor. So Jim mentioned the link between people being, little kids being in their little isolation bubbles during COVID. Is that the reason this RSV is affecting kids so dramatically?
Yeah, so there's a number of reasons that are coming into play right now. So we're actually in this stage right now where we're talking about this triple epidemic, right? So we're seeing, we have the COVID, we have flu, we have RSV, and for the RSV, we actually have RSV every single year. So this is not a new virus. This is not something for people to be alarmed by in that way. And yet, to your point, Margery, there have been obviously a lot of things all of us have been doing to protect ourselves over the last 2 years.
We're just fixing the mic.
Okay, I'm going on about RSV, and I'm not sure if anybody could hear me.
No, we heard
it. We can hear you.
Okay,
We can hear you.
Terrific. Thank you for the adjustment.
Jamie, thanks.
Clearly the fact that kids have not been together, they've not been in schools, a lot of them, their parents have been masked, so we have not had the same exposure to viruses, particularly kids haven't had the same exposure, but we're also looking at like a really interesting time in terms of the way that viruses are operating generally right now. We're seeing viruses coming earlier than they have been in prior seasons. So we're seeing that both for flu and RSV. We've seen flu come about a month earlier than we're used to seeing it. So actually our whole ecosystem is different right now in terms of how quickly our virus is spreading, and also, to your point, our immune systems are down, particularly with kids, and I know we'll talk about that, and older people, certainly people that we need, two categories that we need to be concerned about.
So for cases that are more severe, Doctor, we've also read a lot about a shortage, a dramatic shortage of pediatric beds. What's that about?
Absolutely. So again, sort of really looking at this multifaceted factor. So you have these kids. So most kids in normal years, say prior to the pandemic, and you have most kids below 3 years of age get RSV at some point. And so all of those kids who haven't had RSV because of the pandemic, because of all the things we've talked about, they're getting exposed for the first time. And we're having the younger kids getting exposed for the first time. So you're seeing a larger than normal surge. You're also seeing hospital systems, we've talked about this a lot, that are already under stress. So we've had 2+ years of stress of a hospital system. And if people remember, in the early days of the pandemic, because kids weren't affected as much by COVID-19 and weren't being hospitalized, a lot of those pediatric beds were actually deployed to adults.
Right.
And so there was an entire shift that happened. And actually, pediatricians were working shoulder to shoulder with us to take care of older people with COVID-19. So there was already a loss of beds. Some of them have gone back to pediatrics, but not all of them. And then what we're also going to talk about are other crises that are happening in pediatrics, such as a mental health crisis, where people have what we call heads on beds as well. So using more of those beds, and then there's an entire backup system.
I don't want to get totally off course, but I guess there is some relevance. After the Globe did a story, I think it was Kay Lazar a week ago, about the nightmare in emergency rooms, and I did a show off it, including with one of your colleagues, Representative and Dr. John Santiago was one of the three doctors who were there. What I was stunned by, there was a mention in the Boston Globe by the head of the Health and Hospital Association of Massachusetts that there were 19,000 vacancies in the healthcare system. 19,000, something like 13 to 17%, I can't remember the number, somewhere in the teens of available positions. Is that part of what you're facing?
That's absolutely part of it, particularly for advanced practitioners. So we're looking at nurses, nurse practitioners. There's a huge exodus of folks who have filled that role. So again, you're seeing, not having enough capacity in terms of beds. You're seeing not enough capacity in terms of people caring for the children. And then if you look at the back door, you see not enough capacity in long-term care facilities or mental health facilities for people to go to. So there's ways that we can be creative, so it's not all doom and gloom, but it is a crisis right now in terms of looking at hospital bed capacity.
We're talking to Dr. Katherine Gergen Barnett from Boston Medical Center. If you want to reach her, you can reach her at 877-301-8970 by phone or by text. One of the things you mentioned was the nurses, shortage of nurses and nurse practitioners. Is it about COVID? Is it just about there's not enough of them and the stress is too much? Or what is it?
So it's burnout, right? So we've talked about burnout before. People are leaving. We also know there was a huge motivation economically for people to become traveling nurses, which is terrific in terms of income for individuals. But then it also meant that people weren't sort of staying in place. At any one place. And we also see early retirements. So people who are saying, I thought I had a few more years in me, but I'm really, really tired, and I'm gonna call my retirement now. And it's harder to hire in this environment.
Yeah, I was
at
at the dentist yesterday. She was saying she was having a tough time getting dental hygienists to come in that met her standards. And what about the emergency room crush?
Yes.
That's staff in general, in addition to nurses and doctors?
It's the staff and it's the beds that haven't all. So there's an economic piece here, like there is to everything. We're recognizing that pediatric beds don't necessarily make as much money for hospitals. So I'm not saying that hospitals are doing it just for the money, but there has been a delay in shifting those pediatric beds back to pediatrics.
Why don't they make as much money?
To do this? Kids, thank goodness, kids are generally healthier.
So they're in and out faster.
They're not having
in and out faster.
surgery.
Yep. And the insurance claims are lower. And actually, part of what's happening now, so I spoke initially about remembering all the pediatricians who came to our aid, or I'm a family doctor, so I take care of all ages, but came to the aid of taking care of older people. And now we actually see the reverse, where we're seeing people who are adult doctors going and taking care of kids. So we're all in it together.
And Katherine Gergen Barnett, this is all complicated by the fact, I know you touched on this in passing a few minutes ago, that I don't know if it's appropriate to say a mental health crisis, but sure as hell seems like we're pretty close in terms of kids, even to the point of suicides and attempted suicides. The numbers are up pretty dramatically, at least from what I've read. It's not all an outgrowth of the isolation of COVID, even though that's part of the deal, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So there was actually just a study that came out in the Journal of Pediatrics yesterday saying that there's been a spike in kids, especially teenagers, who have gone to the emergency room with suicidal ideation. But to your point, there's actually been a spike really since 2019, and it's only been further perpetuated by the pandemic. So we can't say this is all pandemic related. There's a lot of places, we could talk about this really all day in terms of mental health and how we take care of it for kids. But part of it is, providers have needed to keep their eye on a lot of other balls and haven't necessarily been addressing it. I think families have been very understandably in sort of crisis mode themselves, so not necessarily able to see it. Schools, where a lot of the mental health crisis or mental health needs of kids are often addressed, haven't managed to sort it. And then, to your point again, is where are the facilities that people can get that care?
And by the way, the things that we talk about on the show every day, which we've lived with off and on in our long lives, a lot of these kids are experiencing for the first time extremism in the world, the impacts of climate change, the war in our political world. I guess that's a piece of extremism. So that introduction to the grown-up world is having a dramatically negative impact on a lot of teenagers, right?
Without necessarily having all the same tools, right? I actually have...
I mean the individual kid, all the coping
individual tools, exactly. And we've talked about loneliness before and sort of, this sense of feeling not good enough from social media and all of that. But the other thing that I've been very interested in tracking is this theory worry that because, to your point, kids are being exposed to these things earlier, is there perhaps some sort of silver lining that those kids, when they hit their midlife, they don't necessarily hit a midlife crisis because they actually now have some of the tools to get through some of these difficult times? And are we able to build resilience earlier in our teens? And that's the hope.
You know what I also thought in this New York Magazine piece, which was not written by a physician, but talked about, the headline was, "Why Are Kids So Sad?"
Yeah.
And it talked about, it said, don't blame everything on technology.
Yep.
And it talked a little bit about parenting,
Yeah.
that we don't let kids play with each other without interfering anymore.
Yeah.
And we don't trust our children. We're monitoring our children. People follow their kids on their phones and all that kind of stuff. And I always thought that was a terrible idea.
Yeah.
And
well, because of your experience with your mother. Why don't you tell people what you've told me a million times your mother used to say to you and your sister?
I thought this was the best thing about my own mother. I'd be going somewhere at 16, and she'd say, "Margie, I trust you to do the right thing. I trust you to do the right thing."
That's pretty heavy.
Well,
of
except
course,
you didn't do the right thing.
I wouldn't do the right
Exactly.
thing, but I would be so impressed that she trusted me to do the right thing. I really tried hard not to get found out. And I use the same line with my own children.
That's a healthy behavior.
Yes. Well,
Nobody should listen. Yeah.
It would prevent you from going too far, so you couldn't come home drunk or pregnant or stoned, because your parents trusted you to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And, I hear my friends who are looking at their kids' phones or they're reading their diaries, which I can't even imagine, that kind of stuff, or going through their drawers, all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's widespread, but I thought that was interesting.
I think that's super interesting. I mean, I think it's thinking about how do we give kids enough autonomy to, I think, to your point, kind of fall on their face a few times and have that be okay. I think, all of us were in this sort of hyper-vigilant shutdown mode where kids really didn't have the opportunity to do that. Many of them were home and then didn't have any of that opportunity. And I think that's part of it. And what I really appreciate in terms of the thrust of some of those arguments is that, frankly, this is obviously it's the individual that's being impacted, but this is a society set of, kind of recreating how are we thinking about the next generation? How do we actually recognize that they are incredibly powerful and smart and able to lead more than we know? And how do we let go of some of that a little bit? And I think that's a challenge for parents, and I think that's a challenge for our society and the way we treat them.
Let's take a call or two. Jennifer in Holliston, you're on with Dr. Katherine Gergen Barnett. Welcome, Jennifer.
Hi, Jim. Hi, Margery.
Hey.
Hi, Dr. Barnett. I'm a nurse in Boston, not associated with Tufts at all, but I was just shocked that Tufts was able to close so much of their pediatric care without any protestation by the state, by the governor, by the mayor of Boston. Just quietly closed it all.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. I think that Tufts closing their pediatric care has been tough for all of us. I know I work at BMC, and this is not a BMC statement. I think a lot of hospitals are doing the same thing in terms of how do we fill those gaps for our city and making sure, again, I think I see a lot of what I saw earlier in the pandemic. People are really calling, by the way, RSV sort of the early pandemic of COVID for kids, using that analogy. And I think the way that I've seen it is that people are really coming in together to think creatively how we can take care of these kids. But to your point, I think there needs to be a lot more strategy as a city and a state in terms of how we build more beds in the future. And frankly, how do we work upstream to take care of kids and keep them healthy so they don't have to get into those beds? But I really appreciate your call.
Jennifer, thanks. One of the things that just occurred to me is the same thing I asked those three doctors, two of whom ran emergency rooms that we did on television a week or so ago. Not only do people like you, and I hope us, care about the people, particularly the kids who come in and the quality care they get. What also makes me nervous are the parents who decide not to even bring their kid in because they hear a story or read a story about how there are no pediatric beds. The ERs are incredibly backed up. Tufts did what it did, as Jennifer just said. What do you guys do? I don't mean individually, but I mean as a class of people, particularly low-income people. People have to I'm going to take the bus there. It's going to take me 90 minutes, and then I'm not going to get taken care of. What do you do about that person who's not in front of you to talk to?
Yeah, I mean, so speaking as a physician who's also very much working on the primary care front, right? So we're always, as a primary care home, we're always reaching out to families and hoping that we'll be the first point of contact. We actually do a lot of treatment. And I know somebody just on your staff who recently had a kid who was sick with RSV who was able to get outpatient treatment. So first of all, as parents, if any of you are listening, please do not ever hesitate. I think especially the younger kids, but only other kids, older kids as well, can have pretty quickly have difficulty with their breathing, and it can get into a pretty sticky situation pretty quickly. So
is that because their bodies are smaller and all the pieces
absolutely.
are small?
You're a
really
doctor. You're a doctor already. So RSV really hits the airways, and it hits the lungs, and it creates a lot of inflammation. And when you have that, those little airways, you maybe heard a term bronchiolitis. So those little airways can get super inflamed. And you also can get pneumonia. So, in those cases, obviously, for the kids, especially with the bronchiolitis, they need to be in the hospital. They need to be monitored. They need oxygen. But not all kids need that. Some kids can get outpatient albuterol. They can actually go and get breathing treatments as an outpatient. There's a lot of things that we can be doing to take care of your children without having them to go to the emergency room. Between 2 to 5% of kids, max 5%, need to go to the emergency room at all. So just remembering that the vast majority of kids who get RSV and older people who get RSV will not need to go.
Tom from Worcester, thank you for calling.
Welcome, Tom.
Hi. I want to say that I think that kids in the future are going to be less resilient than they are right now. The reason is that they're not learning the skills. We are a society, an educational system that prompts kids to think and overthink and to ruminate, and the skills to quiet.
What are you cleaning your car while you're talking to us, Tom, or what? Go ahead, Tom. Can we focus on this for a second? Or not?
I think we may have lost him.
Okay, sorry, Tom.
Sounds
Call
like
us back if you like.
Shut the car door.
So you heard his basic point. He's concerned that kids are less resilient, or whatever he said.
Yeah. So obviously there's lots of ways to approach this. I think the fact is that we are. We're responsible for creating tools for the next generation, and that is part of the work we're doing. We still have a lot more work to do. I have seen an enormous amount of tools already in terms of thinking about, cognitive-based therapy that are giving kids tools. But there's also a lot of creativity. So, for instance, community-based programs for like team up children. So we're training a whole bunch of people to be out in the community health centers to take care of those kids, and then doing community health worker visits. So a lot of it is, what are we allowing our populations to get access to? And I respectfully disagree with you, Tom, and I hope that we can continue to make sure that we're giving people what they need.
I hope the car wash goes well, Tom. Can I, usually when you're here, we're talking about COVID, and it's sort of on the wane. But I have to say, I don't know why I do this obsessively. The first thing I look at every morning, it used to be Trump's tweets, is I go to the New York Times to see, I'm probably going to be doing that again in a couple of days, is I go to the New York Times to see, and the number is roughly the low 300s of 350 people dying a day. The math on that is that's still 100,000 people a year. dying from COVID. It's not what it was, obviously, a year ago or a year before that. So where are we? Is this mostly unvaccinated, older people?
Yes.
It is.
It is still mostly people who are frail, unvaccinated, older people. And yet, actually, maybe you haven't been following the last few days, even just yesterday was 67 deaths. So that
I didn't see it was nationally?
Yeah, nationally.
Oh,
so we are seeing 300s, 200s. There was a big dip. I think what we really, without focusing on it too much, I think the big thing that people probably will want to keep tabs on is the variants that are coming out.
Yes.
And so this is feeling, as some people say, eerily familiar. Hopefully it will not be the pre-Omicron experience. But remember, we walked into Thanksgiving and we felt really good and woke up to Omicron. But this BQ1, BQ11, and now even this BN1, these are all Omicron subvariants. So what I need to say on just a very basic public health measure is that this bivalent vaccine that's out is built on Omicron. So
wasn't Moderna saying great things just yesterday on this?
Great things. Moderna just released a report on it, but both Moderna and Pfizer's bivalent is thought to be more protective against all these variants that are coming out. And obviously, if you're, while I'm on that message, if you're also concerned about our emergency rooms and keeping all those kids maybe with an extra bed, please get your flu shot, because we're also seeing an earlier and more intense flu season than ever. We're talking
with Dr. Katherine Gergen Barnett about medical issues. You can reach her 877-301-8970 by phone or by text. This wasn't on your list, but I thought, and you're a pediatrician, not a cardiologist, but I just wondered what you might have heard in the medical community about John Fetterman, the senator from Pennsylvania, who obviously had a stroke, had a debate a few weeks ago and had real trouble talking, about what people were saying about recovery from stroke and people coming back or not coming back.
Yeah, so I'm a family medicine doctor, so different than pediatric.
That's right.
So we take care of all ages.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's just, it's good to always give the shout out to family medicine when you can. Absolutely, I think, for all of these things, we expect an immediate rebound, right?
Yep.
So you get discharged and you think you can be back to full scope, and that same is true with stroke in terms of recovery, in terms of strength and speech and cognition. So I think really, part of it is also thinking about he doesn't need it, but how are we continuing to pay for longer FMLAs for people so they can actually take the recovery they
need?
What's an
family leave?
Family leave, yeah, exactly. Sick paid leave. Yeah.
And when you and I understand it's really important if you think you're having a stroke to call 911 right away.
Right away.
Right away. Okay.
Yes, it could be anything. It's much better to call. And EMS can evaluate you also. So, it's obviously once you call 911, they need to take you in, but please do not hesitate. Just that call.
This goes beyond the health care to politics, but they're interconnected.
Absolutely.
We've talked ad nauseum on the show. What's the impact of the Republicans if they took the Senate? They are about to take the House. Apparently, any minute they'll hit 218 seats, so they'll control. It's a narrow majority. So what does that mean? That sort of thing. They're not huge believers in public health funding. The thing we hear the most is they're going to be dragging Fauci in there to testify endlessly in front of either a Jim Jordan committee or somebody. But on things like COVID and other kinds of issues, one of the two chambers refusing to fund public health in a serious way is going to demonstrate, like almost everything in this country, that we learn nothing from what we lived through. That is a real fear, is it not?
100%. Happily, the public health emergency funding has been extended.
Oh, it has?
Yeah. Till January at this point, so not, indefinitely. But I think the point is how do we get off the public health emergency funding and actually just make it routine funding for public health? And I think to your point, and I think that we all need to be advocates for this, this has been an incredibly painful 2.5, almost 3 years. And how can we use these lessons to actually go and advocate and be political because health shouldn't be political, but it has become so.
We're talking to Katherine Gergen Barnett. The one thing I don't know that I should, well, one of many I don't know that I should, is when an emergency funding or whatever you called it a minute ago expires in January.
Yes.
I know that almost nobody is getting a booster. Kids, almost nobody is getting a booster, of course, except me and Margery. We were there in about a nanosecond. At least one of us was. Then Margery followed a few weeks later.
Mine. Good job.
Is the vaccine even going to be paid for people who can't afford it?
That's the concern. That's the concern.
Is that really a possibility?
It is. I mean, hopefully the insurance will pay for it just like they pay for other immunizations, right? But we know that free testing has gone away, free masks have gone away. And so continuing to work on that piece because otherwise, you're saving a little bit of money for a ton of spent money down the road. And obviously, we just want to flip the narrative and go upstream and take care of people so we don't spend all that money.
Dr., we're almost out of time, but I have a question from a mom of a 3-month-old worried about getting together with the family for Thanksgiving with the RSV.
Yeah.
What about family gatherings with this lurking?
Well, can I answer that first? You obviously talk to your family members first and say, who did they vote for? And then depending what the answer is, you don't even go to begin with, so you don't have to worry about an infection.
That's why dialogue is so good in our country.
So if you cross that threshold, then what do you do?
Reasons. I actually feel like we've had this conversation over the course of so many years about Thanksgiving, and do you even really need to eat a turkey? So people will be gathering, right? And so there are really basic things, and especially for a mom of a 3-month-old, I'm really glad you called in. So first of all, you need to think about protecting the vulnerable, so making sure that everybody who shows up to the dinner or lunch or whatever you may have had their flu shots, have had their COVID boosters if they're eligible. 1 week before, I'd really recommend that everybody in the family who's going to gather, when you're in a big crowded public space, start wearing masks, just because there's no reason to pick up something if you don't have to. And then thinking about testing the day before and the day of gathering.
Are people even using rapid tests?
Yes.
Other than me?
Yes, absolutely.
They are?
You're not alone.
Really
You're not alone.
And by the way,
absolutely out there.
We're out of time, but this headline from our station here, GBH News, study finds lifting mask mandates led to thousands of new COVID cases.
Yep.
So the schools that kept the masks on longer, like in Boston, it did have an impact on cutting down the spread. So,
that's right.
So
there's hope there too.
Yeah, there is hope there too.
Yeah. So we're doing a good job. We'll just stay vigilant, and happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
And to you as well.
Thank you very, very much for being here with us.
As always, wonderful.
We've been speaking with Dr. Katherine Gergen Barnett of Boston Medical Center. She's the Vice Chair of Primary Care Innovation and Transformation there, a Clinical Associate Professor at Boston University Medical School, and a family medicine physician. Coming up.
Great to see you.
If former President Trump announces his presidential run tonight, what will that mean for the multiple investigations into him? We're going to speak with retired federal judge Nancy Gertner about
From the GBH Newsroom, Priced Out, the fight for housing in Massachusetts. The problems.
Housing crisis has driven up prices to record levels.
Where one-bedrooms go for $3,000 a month.
The solutions.
Biden administration is looking at the idea that factory-made housing can produce homes faster, can produce them cheaper, and they can be used for multifamily homes.
You can hear the entire series right now at gbhnews.org/pricedout.
Funding for our programs comes from you. And the Worcester Art Museum, presenting Jewels of the Nile, where you can experience ancient Egypt in brilliant color through 300 pieces of jewelry displayed for the first time, now on view. More at worcesterart.org. And the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer. The Unclaimed Property Division is holding unclaimed funds for the citizens and businesses of the Commonwealth. You can see if you have unclaimed money at findmassmoney.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Margery Egan live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/EBH News. Are joined now in person, actually, for another edition of On the Docket by retired federal judge Nancy Gertner. She's a senior lecturer at Harvard Law School, BPR contributor. Sadly, for today's segment, she is not wearing red, which means she's not really angry about anything. Nevertheless, it's great to see you, Judge Gertner. Thanks for being here.
It's good to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us, Judge Gertner. So, former President Trump supposedly is going to announce tonight that he's running again. We don't know for sure. But if he does, what does that mean if he is an announced candidate for president in terms of all the investigations against him, Mar-a-Lago, et cetera?
Well, it means he will try to say that those investigations are, occasioned by him running for president. The problem is, of course, they long predated his running for president. So I think the answer is, the bottom line is, it's not going to affect anything. I suppose Garland could make a different, Attorney General Garland could make a different calculation now, that maybe if he's running for president, they should appoint a special prosecutor for the federal investigations. But it really may well be too late for that.
Why do you think, I'm sorry to interrupt you, I have to say, it is insane to me that he's not. The only argument I've heard against this special counsel or special prosecutor, whatever you call them, is, hey, the people are going to criticize you for doing this for political reasons, Attorney General Garland, are going to criticize you no matter who you pick. Why not pick a guy like, I hope I pronounce his name right, I'm sure you know him, former federal judge Luttig, who was the darling of the conservatives, who testified incredibly bravely and strongly at the January 6th hearings. Let Ted Cruz or some lunatic criticize the darling of right-wing legal community in America. Wouldn't that make more sense?
Well, it's akin to what we saw in the case, the Mar-a-Lago case with Judge Cannon, right? I mean, that you want to err on the side of a special master so it doesn't look like you're embroiled. And that was sort of an extraordinary decision with a judge, because presumably the judge should be neutral. I think that there's a problem of timing is the issue now. If you appoint a special master, and the special master then takes the investigation as it has already been finished
for months and months and months of work.
Takes the existing investigation. Then to some degree, how independent is he? He's only making an independent decision at the end, but the evidence will have already been there. If he starts afresh, then we're talking about an extended investigation.
Do you know Garland from his time on the bench?
I do.
And based upon what you know of him, how do you think he'll handle this? I mean, obviously, everybody says who knows him well, every I dotted, every T crossed, and then some. That's how he operates. Your buddy Larry Tribe, when you and he have been on television with me, have said he's convinced now, even though he was in the beginning, that he is going to prosecute. How does he change his behavior, if at all? Forget special counsel. If Trump announces that he's a candidate for president.
I don't think he's going to change his behavior at all. And then the question of special counsel is, why didn't he do that at the beginning? And the notion that Trump announcing for president now triggers that decision, that doesn't make any sense. If it wasn't, Trump was a putative leader of the party before then. If you needed a special counsel, that would have the time to do it. So, I doubt if he's going to do that. And also, as I think we've talked about before, the decision to search Mar-a-Lago was crossing the Rubicon. I mean, that was a public decision to put the former president in the crosshairs. He didn't seem to have any problem doing that. So I tend to doubt it, but who knows?
The reason I'm laughing at you, speaking of Mar-a-Lago and the documents, I told Margery and Jamie, our colleague before the show, on Twitter there's a photograph of someone who allegedly attended Tiffany Trump's wedding the other night in Mar-a-Lago, and it says, here's the gift bag they were given when they left, and it's someone holding a pile of top secret documents, which I thought was pretty funny. Well, we're talking to former retired federal judge Nancy Gertner.
Well, speaking of Mar-a-Lago, the former president apparently has mischaracterized documents he took from the White House as personal and commingled, allegedly, documents in a desk drawer, some marked secret, some marked confidential. So what does this mean in terms of where we're going with this investigation? Is this really surprising, or?
Well, no. I mean, the word that comes to mind is a Yiddish word called schmutz. I mean, he's treating classified documents as schmutz. The Washington Post.
Do you want to translate roughly that for somebody?
Garbage.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
trash, garbage. But I think that the Washington Post reported that the most predominant the theory is that he took it for personal reasons because it was sort of part of the perks of power.
Yeah.
And he didn't want to give it up. It's not like he intended to take down the nuclear program in wherever. And that's why he would be mixing it with other things. Now, that doesn't matter to the statutes that he's being charged with. It doesn't matter if he did it for personal reasons, or it certainly would have made, it would have been more dangerous if he was selling it to the North Koreans. But even if it's for personal reasons, it doesn't matter. That could enter into Garland's calculation about whether to prosecute him, though. Because it's not like and what to prosecute him for. It's not like he was deploying these documents to undermine national security.
But I thought the taking of the documents in and of itself was the issue. Is it not?
No, it's the taking of them. It's the unwarranted retention of them. But when you're talking about prosecutorial discretion, I suppose it would be an automatic decision if he were using it to get money, or if he were using it to undermine the national security. Under these circumstances, it still is a crime. Arguably, it could bear on whether he should be prosecuted. I don't think it should, because the scope of it is so enormous.
We haven't talked to you, I don't know, a week or 2 weeks or whatever. Margery and Jim Dow, who's the editorial page editor of the Globe, were on TV with me the other night, and we were talking about related issues. And one of the things James Dow said, which sort of surprised me, and I know surprised you, Margery, too, is he thought that Donald Trump would not be indicted. And he went into it a little bit. But has anything changed since we've last spoken that would suggest to you that that's not the ultimate outcome from the Department of Justice or Georgia?
Yeah, I think that there are three prongs here. Indictment for the Mar-a-Lago retention of classified information. I really do think that Garland has no choice, notwithstanding what I said a moment ago. I mean, we prosecuted Petraeus for something far less, General Petraeus, who was a Clinton person, for far less serious offenses. Sandy Berger, also a Clinton person, for far less serious.
But documents in his pants. Is
Yeah,
that
that's
correct?
right.
I thought it was
That's
his socks.
No, it's in his pants. I believe. But go ahead.
Right. So, I mean, it's very hard to justify not enforcing these laws. January 6th investigation is more complicated and more fraught, and so that's a different issue.
You mean to prove a causal connection between what he said
and what he knew, right?
You've
got lots of co-conspirators. But the Georgia investigation looks like it's going forward full bore, and I don't see any reason why she would hold back, why the Georgia AG would hold back.
So could we talk about something? I'm going to channel Margery here with her rage at Chief Justice Roberts for not saying anything publicly about Clarence Thomas. The last time we talked about Thomas and how outrageous it was that he wasn't recusing himself was when he was the lone dissenting vote, 8-1, in terms of the turning over of certain documents to January 6th. And what do we learn later? That one of the documents that was turned over, that he didn't want turned over, were the texts and communications of his wife to a bunch of officials, including the chief of staff to the president, saying, let's figure out how to overturn this election. Well, yesterday, he was joined by Alito, so it was 7-2, not 8-1 for a change, in terms of whether or not the court would allow the January 6th committee to subpoena the Arizona GOP chair's phone records. Again, Clarence Thomas was in the minority, and it bears noting that one of the states that Ginny Thomas was in contact with, legislators urging them to essentially overturn the election, was here. I know we sound like kids continually saying this to you. How can this happen? How can a judge who is a chief justice, who is, I assume, worried about his reputation in the history books, not to mention the rest of his life, allowing this kind of grotesque conflict of interest to continue?
Because he has no power over Thomas. He has no power over Thomas.
What if he said something today, like Margery suggests all the time? He gives a speech somewhere
Yes.
and says, put Thomas in a corner.
Yes, he could put Thomas in a corner, but the problem is if he has no real power to remove Thomas, to reduce his salary, to reduce his staff, if he has no real power, all he's done is opened a chasm in the court. You're quite right. I mean, this is another indication of how unbelievably powerful this Supreme Court is, including the power to ignore ethical issues. The only way to stop that is impeachment.
Well, with one exception. I quoted you the other day, and then as soon as I
Always
did,
a bad sign.
I realized I'm not sure it was you, but I think it was. And I quoted you. I'm not sure you're the one who said it. Aren't you the one who suggested that one of the things that could be done is a panel of former either Supreme Court, well, there aren't enough former Supreme Court justices, former federal, let's say, appellate judges, who basically sit as an ethics panel to which questions of conflicts, it was you.
It was me, and that was a proposal in the White House Commission report that I sat on. Right. It was a proposal to come up with a board that had to be judges because there would be a separation of powers issue.
Good point.
And you would create senior appellate judges to sit on ethical violations of the Supreme Court.
And there were 30 of you on that. 30 of you?
Something a little more
and
than
some conservatives. But who could be against? Why was anybody? Was anybody against that?
Yeah, because in order to implement that, there would have to be either internal within the court, or there would have to be a statute that would say that there would be, and that would raise separation of powers issues as well. But the opposition was, if we do this now, it will delegitimize the court. It will make it appear that this court is, doing something wrong. Well, my answer to that is they are doing something wrong.
Exactly.
They just are.
Well, in this great piece by Linda Greenhouse in The Atlantic, she talked about it was, going beyond just making bad decisions that Robert was complaining about, saying, just because we have bad decisions doesn't mean we're illegitimate or worse to that effect. And she talks about them abusing their power, which is what it seems like to me, because they are quite out of touch with public. Not that they always have to follow public opinion, but they don't want to be, over in the outfield when everybody else is at home base. You know what I mean?
Well, she makes an interesting point. I mean, to some degree, the Supreme Court is always out of touch because they have life tenure. But it has never been packed to this degree with younger justices who will be on longer than we would have expected. So that's the anti-democratic nature of the Supreme Court is made much worse by the packing of the court by Trump. But she also, this is sort of inside baseball, if I can translate it into English. It's also that the court has taken issues in cases that they didn't have to take.
Right.
I didn't understand that.
That 1925 thing.
Could you explain that a little bit, Judge
I did not know
Gertner?
this, that everything changed in terms of what they took. Explain that.
Well, in the past, they would be sitting like a regular court of appeals, meaning if you appeal to the First Circuit Court of Appeals and you don't like the outcome, you would go to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court then had to take the case.
Right.
That changed in 1925 so that they could pick and choose the cases that they took depending on whether there was a conflict in the circuits or there was a public interest involved. This court is picking and choosing, candidly, the Republican agenda. It is exactly coincident with the Republican agenda. But it's also the Dobbs case. They didn't actually have to blow out abortion totally.
Right.
They could well have. They had a very narrow issue, which is whether 15 weeks appeal, was under Roe v. Wade. They're taking cases. They're taking cases from a direct appeal from a district court judge, bypassing the Court of Appeals. In other words, they are reaching for the issues that are important, candidly, to the right wing in ways that no other court has done.
Well, the other thing that Linda Greenhouse said in this piece was that after the crisis of the New Deal, when FDR wanted to put more people on the court, that the court, and I never knew this either, I'm interested in what you think, that they reached kind of this tacit understanding with Americans, the American public, that you give us enormous power, but in return we'll give you predictability, stability, and ultimately what you want.
Right. So the predictability is we'll follow precedent. And this court has basically shredded precedent. I wanted to write, never got a chance to write it because it was, the events overtook me, but essentially from Thursday to Monday of the end of the term, they shredded precedent that that Republicans had created and judges across the country had created. So predictability was, and stability is in the same category. And the notion was that they are surely not consistent with public opinion, but they are not so far ahead of public opinion. You can't say that last term is remotely fitting within that.
So what happens if again in this piece talks about that if you're between 18 and 29, 63% of the people in that age group, according to this poll, disapprove of the Supreme Court. So what happens if Americans lose their faith in the legitimacy of the court?
That's a very troubling concept, and because the Supreme Court actually relies on the other branches to enforce its edicts. It doesn't have a standing army, as was famously said in an earlier decision. So that would, if the Supreme Court's decisions were not followed, that would undermine the rule of law. But in terms of the poll that you were describing, there are things we can do, as we've talked about before on this show. We can enlarge the court. That's a vote of the Congress. That is not a constitutional amendment. We can have a constitutional amendment in addition that would limit the terms of justices and say, for example, that that justices have to retire at a particular point. There's enforceable ethics rules. I think that you're going to begin to see that happening because the court really has crossed a line, which is extraordinary.
Well, one last thing about maybe this is fine, but it kind of struck me as, maybe because I've been a reporter all my life, but that the Supreme Court justices, 4 of them, Roberts didn't go and Thomas didn't go, but the other 4, Alito, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett, all went to this dinner, the Federal Society dinner. And I know that the Federal Society kind of handpicked them and it's been a lifelong crusade of this Catholic guy, Leonard Leo, who's now got 6 Catholics on the Supreme Court.
Only you could say that.
Exactly.
Well,
exactly right.
There are some non-extremist Catholics, liberal social justice Catholics. There's quite a few of them, but in any case, they're not of that ilk. Something doesn't seem right to me. They should go to be feted at the Supreme Court. By the way, we got sound of
Here's
Barrett.
Amy Coney Barrett making a joke
at this
about
Federalist
protesters.
Society dinner.
Here she is, very brief.
It's really nice to have a lot of noise made not by protesters outside of my house.
Yeah, if you couldn't make that out, she said, it's really nice to have a lot of noise made by protesters outside my house. And by the way, the reports on the dinner say the loudest applause came. They got good applause, the 4 of them. And when whoever was the MC of the evening mentioned the overturning of Roe v. Wade, the place went absolutely crazy, meaning in support of the 4 justices.
But I guess my point is, should they be going, am I being too nitty-picky here? Should they be going to dinners with the Federal Society in such a public way? This clearly right-wing group, which is I know they are right-wing judges, but there's something that seems like they shouldn't do that.
The Federalist Society has, for the longest time, pretended to neutrality. I just want to make that clear. They go around law schools around the country, and they have forums, and I get invited to those forums as well, and they have a balance on them, so there's someone who is a liberal versus someone who's a conservative. And I've reached the point where, and they pretend then to neutrality, to being non-denominational, for want of a better word. And, I've now reached a point where I will say, that's of course a ruse.
Yeah.
They have pushed an agenda, a specific agenda, and they have pushed it not just in terms of their own work, but in terms of the work of Leonard Leo and who they've gotten on the court. Was it wrong for the Supreme Court justices to go? That really goes back to an interesting question. Not technically wrong, given the ostensible nature of the Federalist Society, any more than it's wrong for judges to go to the ACLU or the American Constitution Society. It's not wrong per se, but we're bending over backwards about Garland and the appearance of impropriety.
That's a very good point.
And we're bending over backwards about Judge Cannon in Mar-a-Lago about the appearance of impropriety.
That's
and these justices at this moment are going to the Federalist Society. It is absurd. And it says something about the impunity that they feel. You know, you can't touch us. It doesn't matter what the public says. It's outrageous.
You know, one last thing about this. I feel sometimes like I am Senator Sheldon Whitehouse's press aide. But if you want to understand the role of the Federal Society and dark money in the nomination and confirmation of justices, particularly to the Supreme Court, just Google Sheldon Whitehouse and dark money. He has written and spoken so powerfully about both those things. You should really check it out.
And it's not just the money, the campaigns to get these justices on the court. Barrett, in particular, is an example of somebody who actually was targeted in law school by a conservative professor to, to get certain kinds of clerkships, to get certain kinds of positions that will then put her in line for the Supreme Court. There is nothing wrong with that legally. Right, but it gets back to your point about then when you return to your sponsors and are congratulated like this, it certainly creates an appearance of impropriety.
So we only have a minute or two left. Could you explain briefly the student loan situation that was only going to help like 50 million Americans, so who gives a damn? My understanding is the federal court didn't just issue a stay or stop temporarily the granting of the processing of, I think, tens of millions of applications already filed, but essentially ruled the whole law was unconstitutional, that he didn't have the executive authority. Congress had to do it. What's the practical impact of what that judge decided?
There are two sets of cases.
Oh, okay.
And one set of case said that the attorneys general didn't have the standing to bring the case because it's not clear how they were injured by the student loan program. Judge Pittman, who's a Trump-appointed judge, and I hate saying that, but vacated the program, skipping over the standing issues and ignoring all the real procedural issues. So yes, he went ahead. It's like saying you want to challenge something that have no business challenging. No matter, I'm going to vacate it anyhow.
So as of the moment, the student loan program doesn't exist.
Has been stopped. The review of applications has been stopped. The Supreme Court has now also issued a stay just yesterday, I think, of the application evaluations for the same set of reasons.
So we could be a year until, is that right? Until there's any determination. And a lot of people plan their lives based upon this forgiveness program.
But it's very interesting. The court could hasten the decision making. That is another discretionary decision that they are making, not to hasten this. But the claims of the attorneys general, of the various attorneys general, think about it for a moment. They're saying they're harmed because their states invested in student loans programs, student loans that undermine the future prospects of so many people. So the undermining of the future prospects of the students versus, gee, we're going to lose a little bit of money. It's extraordinary. Just extraordinary.
By the way, it's almost like you're wearing red today. It was unbelievable. I was wrong. Nancy Gertner, it's great to see you as always. Thank you so much.
I ran out of red.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Judge Gertner, for being with us.
Really great.
We've been speaking with retired federal judge Nancy Gertner. She's a senior lecturer at Harvard Law School and a Boston Public Radio contributor. Coming up, GBH Executive Arts Editor Jared Bowen is here to discuss the arts and culture events in and around Boston and all the latest about why museums around the world are begging people to stop gluing themselves to the artwork. You are listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, and we are streaming on YouTube at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Arun Roth. Coming up on GBH's All Things Considered, a new report reveals racial disparities in how much Massachusetts students earn after graduating from high school. The commission charged with replacing the state's seal and motto is meeting again, and officials are giving an update on how the Commonwealth is handling wildfires. Those stories and all the day's news starting at 4 on GBH's All Things Considered.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Newbury Court, a full-service residential community in Concord, Massachusetts, for persons 62 or over, committed to creating an active, independent lifestyle. More at newburycourt.org or 978-369-5155. And Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts, offering Medicare Advantage plans with new benefits like enhanced dental coverage, as well as a broad network of doctors, hospitals, and specialists. BlueCrossMA.com/go.
Trusted. Local. News. This is 89.7 WGBH. WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. Boston's local NPR.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Margery, and we're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News. We're joined now at the library by GBH's Executive Arts Editor, Jared Bowen, who incredibly, in a protest, is glued to the desk. Jared, it is excellent to see you. He's been here since last Friday, and I admire the principle. It's really great you're doing what you're doing.
My conviction, you like that?
I like it.
And my staying power?
Your conviction.
Yeah, well, Jim mentions being glued to the desk because some of these climate change protesters, and I get it, they're very upset about climate change, but they've been doing what apparently is destructive to these artworks, even though the Van Gogh, which one was it, the wildflowers?
Sunflowers,
Sunflowers,
yeah.
thank you.
Behind glass, right?
Yeah, behind glass, but apparently even the glass protection is not enough. And so these museums all around the world have gathered together to fight back. What's going on?
Yeah, well, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, and so we won't renew the debate about why they're doing this and if there is any justification. Do the ends justify the means, and in that it draws attention, headlines, and more eyeballs to the issues of climate. But yeah, a huge list of museums have gotten together, more than about 100 galleries around the world, and they have said this has got to stop because it is incredibly problematic. So far, the climate activists have chosen works that are, Jim, as you mentioned, behind glass. So they're throwing food on something that's not actually going to penetrate a work. However, there has been some slight damage because even if you're throwing it on glass or plexiglass, it can seep into the frame. Some of the frames have been damaged. These are antique frames as well.
Yes.
And so there are other issues that just don't get talked about here. And one is an economic issue, that museums might be forced to take on more insurance if this continues. There could be an isolation issue where anybody who's seen the Mona Lisa knows you can't get close to the painting itself anymore because there have been so many attacks against it. So suddenly, will the world's greatest works be even at a further remove so that you can't get up close to them?
I'm sorry, you were mid-thought. I'm sorry.
No, so I was just going to say, so yeah, museums are saying that we have a lot of issues here that aren't being addressed, and this is, again, why destroy something beautiful or pretend to destroy something beautiful in the name of saving something else that's beautiful, the climate.
By the way, of the 90-some museums, all huge, that signed on to this statement, the MFA here is one of them. And our intention, I should say, Margery and I, is to bring up this topic every week because it's really easy to put Jared into a total frenzy. You can see he's building to that point. He's about 10 seconds away from an explosion.
I thought I was clear.
Okay.
Well, my other concern, here we go. My other concern is a copycat. So yes, this is very coordinated, and there has been kind of messaging and coordination about this, where they'll do it, how they'll do it, although I'm not sure they've talked about thoroughly enough the gluing oneself to a frame or piece of art, because as we talked about, it's not a very good look when your face is just slammed up against the artwork. But so this has been coordinated, but what about the people who aren't thinking about these things and really do take down a treasured piece of art?
Since you're obsessed with this, very briefly, and then we'll move on. I understand odd protests, and I'm not going to debate it with you, so don't worry. I don't understand the gluing your head to the wall thing. What is that exactly? Do you have any understanding? You don't.
I can't get in their heads to understand what this is about.
Very much.
Well, that was the Operation Rescue people did that in the anti-abortion movement. They were gluing themselves to and chaining themselves to radiators.
I thought they handcuffed themselves to radiators,
yeah,
right?
I think there was some gluing going on there, as I
Yeah.
recall as well, but I could be wrong about that. Anyway, I love this story. I did not know that Winston Churchill took up painting because he was battling depression. And he sold a lot of these paintings, which, I mean, they're not bad.
This is an interesting story. I think that we have learned over the years that a number of leaders, Ulysses S. Grant, Winston Churchill, George W. Bush, have turned to art. And some of them, like Bush, was after the presidency as kind of a means to, I think for him, it was reflection of some of the leaders he encountered and some of the people who were most influential in his life. But yeah, Winston Churchill, we're talking about about this more now because some of his paintings recently sold at auction for hundreds of thousands of dollars. But last year, they were selling for millions of dollars at Christie's in London. And yeah, Margery, after he was experiencing depression after having to resign from the Royal Navy during World War I, he turned to painting as a means to just kind of express himself and recover and work through his issues in his head. And so he's somebody who started with watercolor and then turned to oil painting, did a lot of landscapes and still lifes, and major people have now collected Winston Churchill's art.
Well, first of all, I love the picture of Winston Churchill, who's painting with a cigar in his mouth.
Great,
I mean, that's pretty good. And that he also, a bunch of presidents bought his pictures.
I don't know, but bought or he donated one to FDR.
Eisenhower, Truman, Queen Elizabeth, Claire Booth Luce, Vivian Leigh, from Gone with the Wind, of course, the other another great actor, Laurence Olivier, and let's not forget that Brad Pitt bought one of Churchill's paintings for Angelina Jolie. This, of course, was before their breakup.
Okay, can I tell you something? I had never seen any of his paintings, even though I know very little about his interest in this. I looked up Tower of the Kutubia Mosque.
That's the one that Brad bought for Angelina.
Can I tell you something? It is beautiful.
Margery's obsessed.
I mean, it's got that French Impressionist deal going on. Obviously, I'm a big art scholar, but it is really quite beautiful. I mean, the guy was pretty talented.
I haven't seen any of his work up close. Everything that I looked at.
I looked online.
Looking at these leaders, you're seeing it online, but most of them, I have to say, were impressive. Unfortunately, Hitler's work also very impressive as
that true?
As an artist.
I didn't know that.
I mean, there are people who have speculated, not in a joking manner, that if he had been admitted to art school, maybe this all would not have happened. But if you look, it's amazing to me to see the different brains that people have, and you can have this creative output. And in Winston Churchill, this is something he kept at for years and years and years. And then in the 1950s, there was actually a U.S. exhibition tour of his paintings around. I think it started at the Nelson Atkins Museum in Kansas City and went throughout the United States because he became pretty treasured. Obviously, there's a huge name attached to it, so that helps elevate your career. But yeah, there's absolutely merit. And you do know what you're talking about because he didn't, as much like Picasso and some of the more modern painters, but he did love Monet Manet and the Impressionists, and that was the style that influenced him.
One of the things, I know you're a fan of his, when he glued himself to Queen Elizabeth, did you find that to be troubling, or a younger Queen Elizabeth?
I love how she just kept walking. She would not be stopped.
That's right. She had her purse at her side.
Keep him down there with
curious.
the corgis.
You mentioned Hitler. What kind of painting did he do?
Some of the ones I saw, they were of buildings or architectural buildings and landscapes, and he had a great eye for detail. Yeah, it just feels so awful to say that. But also remember that part of the reason that there was the horrific Nazi looting is because he had this vision of creating this massive museum in Europe. There was a whole architectural plan for what he was going to do with all of the art that had been taken from Jewish families.
Oh yeah, stealing it.
Yeah.
Can I ask one last thing? I don't know if you know. Is there any of the Churchillian? I don't know if that's the right word. Is there any of his art in the Eastern United States?
I haven't seen any. Okay. No. I guess we'll have to talk to Brad Pitt, right?
We'll have to ask Brad Pitt.
Next time he's on.
That's right. I assume Angelina.
Well, I guess Angelina, because it was hers at the end of the day.
That's right. She still has the painting. We don't know. Maybe she had to give it back to him in the divorce settlement. I'm not really clear about the Angelina-Brad breakup.
Get on it, Margery.
I know. I thought I knew everything about it. I did not know about the Winston Churchill art. So let's talk about something else that sounds fantastic. This, the MFA, Touching Roots, Connecting Cultural Histories at the MFA, as the headline reads.
Yeah, so this is at the third floor of the Art of the Americas wing, which frequently gets rotated. And right now you'll see the story of basically the African diaspora and the artists who didn't necessarily travel to Africa, the black artists and artists of color, but really looking at their homeland and taking these themes and creating artwork out of that. And so you'll find all manner of artists in textiles and oils and sculpture. You'll find artists going back through history and to the present day. In fact, there's an artist by the name of Stephen Hamilton I was quite drawn to because of these heroic figures that he represents going back centuries and centuries and centuries, but putting more modern figures, high school students, within these works, idealizing them. And so it's the subtitle to the show is Black Ancestral Legacies in the Americas, and it's just this great spirit that ties to it, and how in the 1960s, when Pan-Africanism was taking hold and the civil rights movement was happening here and African nations were getting their independence, how artists were manifesting that in their own way. So it's all manner of story told. As the curator was explaining to me, this isn't necessarily a Boston story, but it's a story for Boston audiences.
Well, it said that John Wilson, one of the artists, was born in Roxbury.
Yeah.
We love the local angle.
He was, and he did that great bust, the head of Martin Luther King Jr., that's now in the Capitol Rotunda. He was actually, by the way, a little open studio trivia. He was my first interview for the show almost 10 years ago.
Really?
Yeah.
You know, speaking of the dreaded local angle, maybe I should know this. The MFA's commitment to art by artists of color gone up dramatically after their travails of a couple of years ago with those students?
Well, like every museum, especially after the racial reckoning in the last 2 years, absolutely.
But I mean, over and above what George Floyd meant to this country, they took a pretty hard hit out of that.
And I think that everything kind of happened together. That the issue with the Davis Leadership Academy happened before the racial reckoning, but I think it just exacerbated and amplified the reason why, first of all, artists of color, but also let's look inward. We have this museum filled with art from all over the world, but why are we not looking at our own community? And that has definitely changed. You see that at the ICA, you see that at the Museum of Fine Arts.
Great story about Louise Nevelson. Did not know she was from Ukraine. Did not know she wound up in Rockland, Maine when the family came here from there, and felt very out of touch there. So tell us what's going on with her.
So full disclosure, Louise Nevelson is probably one of my top 3 favorite artists of all time.
Why is that?
It's an interesting story. For years and years and years, I would go into museums and I would see her work, which her most iconic works are these large black sculptures. And they're wooden sculptures, and they're filled with all manner of things that she would find and then turn into a sculpture. And I never understood it, and it just drove me crazy. Why am I seeing this everywhere? What am I missing? And then one day, it's kind of all cracked open for me. The forms that she creates, the shapes, the way she was able to walk down the street or into a garbage heap and see something that would work beautifully in this sculptural form. And so ever since, I've just been completely besotted with her, the late Louise Nevelson, I should say. So yeah, she came here in 1905 with her family from present-day Ukraine, and they settled in Rockland, Maine, very New England town, very gorgeous town. It's also where you'll find the Farnsworth Art Museum, which is presenting this show, Louise Nevelson, Dawn to Dusk. But they were a Jewish family, and that wasn't necessarily the community for a Jewish family, Rockland, Maine, in the early 1900s. So she got out of town pretty quickly, moved to New York, and established this career for herself where she just pushed and pushed and pushed, and she worked with some of the greats and learned from some of the greats, and she made drawings and sculpture and collage and these assemblages. Later in her life, she would turn to jewelry, and she also reconnected with Maine finally. They hadn't really appreciated her until toward the end of her life, and so she donated a number of works, and you'll find them here. But it takes you through the early days of her career, including some works I had never seen, some self-portraits. We're talking about Winston Churchill experiencing tough times. The same with Louise Nevelson. And so she renders herself always in beautiful clothing, because she styled herself as much as she styled her art, often with 2 sets of false eyelashes, not just one. She was a very, very striking figure. But we see how she represented herself in these early self-portraits, and it's mesmerizing. But also, when you look at this early work, you see how she took one form from sculpture and then moved it into the collage and moved it into painting, but all in a way that constantly churned and evolved and changed.
Have you been to this museum?
I have, yeah.
And I don't even know where Rockland is. I don't know if I've ever heard of it. Where is it?
It's Mid-Coast, Maine. It's about 3 hours up the highway, and I love Maine. I've been going there a lot over the last 10 years because it really is one of the artistic havens. And so many of the great artists have either spent time there or come from there, I think because of the coast and the landscape, and there's just a different kind of light, but it's mesmerizing.
We haven't mentioned, we've talked about so many elections. We have failed to mention another lunatic was defeated in Maine, Paul LePage, an attempt to be reelected governor, defeated by Janet Mills, the incumbent. That was another great moment for America.
She called Rockland a WASP Yankee town, according to the Globe. I love it.
Yeah, she took no prisoners. She was tough.
You know, in addition, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say my favorite Louise Nevelson story is that her son, because she was not wealthy for most of her career. Her fame didn't come until the end of her life.
I thought she married a rich, wealthy shipping executive from New York.
She did, but in the early 1900s, even then, she wasn't having it. If he wanted her to stay home and take care of the kids, or I think she only had one child, she was not having that. She wanted to be independent. She wanted to be an artist. And she could only do that, she recognized, in New York, so she left. But at one point, her son brought her some furniture because she couldn't afford to buy her own, and after he left, she promptly dismantled it and turned it into sculpture because she saw great things in it.
By the way, there are also, this is not her art, there's some photographs of her I'm looking at while you're speaking that are just jaw-droppingly beautiful. I mean, they're just beautiful. This guy, Jack Mitchell, whoever he is, has a couple of photographs of her that you should just check out. They're truly beautiful.
So did you segue from Rockland up to Colby College? Is this what happened?
Two separate visits, actually.
Two separate visits, okay.
But so Alex Katz, a lot of people know him for his very graphic imagery, graphic in the sense of he kind of came out of the pop art tradition in the 1950s and 60s, and somebody else who didn't get a lot of attention until probably the last couple of decades when people have really started to pay attention to what he's done. Nobody ever knew this love that he has had for theater and for dance. And so at the Colby Art Museum right now at Colby College, which is a fabulous museum, they have a tremendous collection.
There's somebody there, some alum had a lot of money. That college is gorgeous.
Well, and the museum too, the Lunders, a really great family, were responsible for a lot of philanthropy that created the museum as it exists today. Not unlike Nevelson with the Farnsworth, Alex Katz has donated a lot of his own work to the Colby Art Museum. And so right now they have this terrific show that looks at his love of dance and theater. And from the very beginning, he came from parents who were performers in some regard. His mother in Yiddish theater and his father as part of an amateur theater troupe. But in the 1950s, he teams up with Paul Taylor and the Paul Taylor Dance Company. And so all along, he's painting dance. He is making costumes and sketches and set design. And so you find all of that come to the fore at in this exhibition. And I will say the way it's hung with this Bach music playing in the background, there is such an energy. You're looking at these 2D paintings that feel animated because you get all these little slices of limbs and fingers splayed the way dancers do and necks arched. It's really riveting.
Okay, go ahead.
I was just going to say it was interesting in this Murray White review of this exhibition in the Globe. He talked about how when pop art came in, the Roy Lichtenstein and Andy Warhol and stuff, the cast did not go with that flow, and he kind of stayed doing what he was doing. And I bet that can be really difficult for artists, because if you see something really changing, then I guess I don't know. Wouldn't your instinct be to change too, so that you could be part of this new movement?
Unless you believe in what you're doing. I mean, that is the challenge that artists often have. The other challenge is their galleries will tell them, all right, we're only going to represent you if you continue on this trajectory because this is what's selling right now, or this is what the art world and the critics are paying attention to. It takes a lot of conviction and confidence in yourself to say, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going that route.
And he did.
He stuck to exactly what he wanted to do. Yeah.
Okay, so it's Tuesday. Do you have any idea what you're doing on Friday or no?
I do know what
you
I'm doing.
You do actually?
Yeah, I do remember.
Great. What is it? I meant it's 3 days away. I didn't know if you had it all planned out.
You love to tease me. Well, but don't you recognize that what did you do on the show last night?
I have no idea.
Exactly.
No idea. That was yesterday. Is that what you're asking about?
And by this point,
why would I care about that?
Right. And by this point in the week, Open Studios put to bed, as we say, and we're on to the next. But I do remember because I know I'm going to be teased. We're touring you through the MIT Museum.
Oh, we were just talking about the MIT Museum.
That looks like it's spectacular.
It is. And so I sit down, I play with robots and work with robots and sit down and write a poem with one.
Do you really?
Yeah, we'll show you how artificial intelligence is being used now.
And what's this other? Every single week, it's like Marjorie's page. She says, I love this new thing you're doing. Can you describe to people what this thing is that she is infatuated with?
So essentially, the talk that I just did, talking about art on the radio, we have done that for television now in our YouTube channel to put pictures to all of the words and take you through visually everything that I often talk about
Well,
on the
it's good
radio.
you do because it's television. So having a visual element, I think, is probably a pretty good
thing. It's compact, right? It's not a half hour. It's what, 4 minutes or 2 minutes or 5 minutes?
The whole thing is about 6 minutes.
Yeah, 6 minutes. So you get a little bit of each one, and then you can decide what you want to go see in person or not see in person, or just enjoy what you're seeing. I like that a lot.
Yeah, we've been having a lot of fun doing it. And as I always say, the great part of this job is there's so much to cover. There's so much out there to do and for people to experience. That's why I love it.
Jared, it's good to see you.
Jared Bowen, thank you very much.
As always, Jared Bowen.
We've been speaking with GBH Executive Arts Editor Jared Bowen. He's host of Open Studio, which you can catch Channel 2 on Channel 2 Friday nights at 8:30. And to get the YouTube deal, tell people how you get that if they want to watch the thing.
He's in panic now, I can tell.
Just
silence.
Yeah, Google
Jared Bowen on YouTube?
Exactly.
Okay, Google Jared Bowen on YouTube.
Okay.
All right, next week we'll get our act together on that, Jared.
Okay,
all right?
fine.
Okay. Up next.
Thank you, Jared. They're applauding to try to drown out his non-answer to the YouTube question.
CNN's John King, Chief National Political Correspondent for CNN, John King. He's going to join us to discuss what the heck is going on in D.C., the latest political headlines. You are listening to Boston Public Radio, 89 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library. I'm really messing this up.
We are doomed.
Okay, one more thing. We are streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News.
Thank you.
Being a member of GBH has many benefits, including access to thousands of hours of PBS programs through GBH Passport. With GBH Passport, you get 24/7 digital access to programs like All Creatures Great and Small, Frontline, Grantchester, and so many more. Watch as much as you want, anytime you want. It's your gateway to a world of entertainment and discovery. If you're already a GBH member, register today or become a member and sign up at gbh.org/passport.
Support for our programs comes from you and Mass General Cancer Center, dedicated to providing compassionate care and cancer specialists who are experienced in the cancer you have. When you hear the word cancer, their team is ready. Learn more at massgeneral.org/cancer. And Swan Galleries with contemporary art at auction November 17th, featuring artists such as Keith Haring, Jenny Holzer, Kehinde Wiley, and Jeff Koons. Catalog and bidding at swangalleries.com and on the Swan app.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Margery Egan. We are live at the Boston Public Library, streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News. We're joined now by somebody who a lot of us have been seeing a lot of for the last week or so. CNN's Chief National Correspondent John King also hosts Inside Politics weekdays at noon, and also he's, of course, in charge of the Magic Wall. Hey there, John King.
If you're sick of me, I can go home.
Well, it's funny you should say that. Every time I turn on the TV, there you are, John King. So I feel like I've been in communication with you like all week long. But we are hearing all these reports from CNN, from other places, that the former president's going to announce tonight he is going to run again. Is there any reason to think that that's not going to happen, or is it going to happen?
His aides say that he told them they can confirm on the record that he's going to run for president. So we will take them at their word until we see at 9 o'clock tonight out of Mar-a-Lago. As you both well know, there's a lot of controversy in the Republican Party about whether this is a good idea anyway. And then add in is it a good idea at this moment, 1 week removed from a midterm election that did not go the way the Republicans had hoped it was going to go. And a lot of blame is being put at the former president's feet. But he is Donald Trump, and we all know, this is an understatement, he marches to his own beat and to his own drummer. And so here we go. I was trying to, Boston Latin School education, right? He's trying to be the next Grover Cleveland, right? Only once have we done this. Only once has a president left office and come back to win a second term with, 4 years in between. So we shall see. Well,
I was listening to Maggie Haberman this morning, and she is the great reporter for the New York Times, has covered Donald Trump since he was a king of the tabloids, and she was at the Daily News, New York Post, etc. She says he's just going to say he won. Everybody won, even though they lost, and kind of try to turn reality on its head, and that's going to be a strategy, just to kind of deny. That seems to me to be hard to do, but maybe if anybody can do it, it would be Donald Trump.
I think that's a great way to put it, in the sense that, look, he's defied political gravity many, many times, dating back to the very beginning when he ran against a very accomplished field of Republican politicians in 2016, and he ended up being the human chainsaw and plowed them over, won the nomination. Everybody said, okay, but he'll never be president. He won the presidency, and there are all these investigations about him, but none of them have caused him any at least significant legal peril yet. He spends a lot on lawyers' fees, but nobody's gotten him over the barrel yet. And so here we go again. Maggie makes a great point in the sense that Donald Trump lies to his base. Now, how big is his base? How much of his base will learn after 2018, 2020, 2022? Donald Trump is now the single most dominant force in 3 consecutive Republican defeats. 2018 midterms, 2020 presidential, 2022 midterms. How many of his own voters say, even if you still believe him, that we want to win? Right? It's time to move on. It's time to change quarterbacks. We don't know the answers to those questions yet, and I think that's one of the reasons Trump is getting in now. He wants to try to rally his people, get them to go off into their partisan corner and stick with him, play to their loyalty now before they might actually start thinking about this and thinking that, again, a lot of people out listening don't like him. But for those who do like him, some love him, Donald Trump's trying to keep them together. Whereas if they start thinking about what happened in this election, and then look back at the last couple, even if you believe the lie that he was cheated, it's like, can he win again? That's a fair question to ask yourself.
John, I was watching with one eye your show at noon as I was also talking to Margery, or looking at her with the other eye. You put up an approval poll. I hope I got this right. Democrats, Independents, Republicans. Democrats, not surprisingly, 90-something to 4 disapproved. Independents, almost 2-1. But it seemed to me that the Republican approval number was lower than it's been of Donald Trump. Was I right, or was I misreading that?
No, it's still pretty good, but 20% of Republicans disapprove of him. This is in the exit poll taken nationally during the midterm elections a week ago today. 10% of Democrats disapprove of President Biden, if you want that context. So Donald Trump has twice as much disapproval in his own family, if you will. And again, back to Margery's point, I don't want to assign too much strategy or strategic thinking to Trump. He is largely a creature of impulse. But if you're Donald Trump and you notice some decay, right, whether it's the support for Ron DeSantis, whether it's Mike Pence, Mike Pompeo, Glenn Youngkin, pick other people moving around trying to get ready to run for president, that you may be getting out there because your instinct is, I got to get out there now because I'm losing a little bit. Does Donald Trump understand how much? Does he understand his approval, disapproval? If you look at the battleground states in the exit polls, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Arizona, Michigan, he's in the tank. Now, again, can he change that? He has defied gravity before, but the evidence before us is that his brand is more toxic than ever. And his answer to that is to run for president again. We'll see. We'll see.
I want to ask you a question in a second about one of my least favorite politicians, the loser in Arizona, Kari Lake. Before I do, Tony on YouTube wants to know, over your right shoulder, is that a Margery bobblehead to the right of John King on the shelf? It looks a hell of a lot like Margery. Is that Margery on the shelf there to the right? No.
I don't have
turn back a little bit. See that thing right there? Who is that?
That over there?
Yeah.
That's my son.
No, there's a woman and the little blonde thing. No. Keep going to that one.
That's my son. He's got very blonde hair.
Oh, there you go.
It is your son.
This is what my hair looked like. This is what my hair looked like until I was in my 30s.
I guess that's not Margery.
Okay, no, it is not.
I had yellow blonde hair.
Okay.
I had beautiful yellow blonde hair until I was in my 30s, and then mom's DNA kicked in, and this is what I got.
That's a little embarrassing there. So one Kari Lake question. One of the most classless people, me talking, not you. When I watch you during elections, one of the things I love most, John, about what you do is you never miss an opportunity to praise the men and women who dedicate their lives to do the grunt work to make sure that elections do work and that we have a democracy here. Of course, Kari Lake, among her other BS, was trashing them, saying they're incompetent, they're breaking the law, the thing is cooked. Has she had the decency to concede yet to Hobbs, or is that not only not happened, but never going to happen?
It has not happened today, and I'm going to give Kari Lake a little bit of grace here in the sense that it's a 20,000 vote, 19,000 vote and change lead for Katie Hobbs right now. If Kari Lake wants to wait until they are 100% done with the count, that's her right. And we should respect that. If she wants to wait until they do the routine canvass they check a few machines just to make sure they were working, she has every right to do that. But the math is the math, and she tweeted out last night, Arizonans know BS when they see it. I do stand up for those people. Jim, my dad was a jail guard at the old Charles Street Jail. There are public servants, the people who get paid back in those days, nothing. And even nowadays, they don't get paid very good money. A lot of them could go work for an accounting firm or take that experience and go work for a political consulting firm. They count the votes. They're Democrats, they're Republicans, they're independents. We don't care who they are. They're civil servants who are doing the foundational brickwork of democracy, and for them to be attacked, especially in Arizona, I'm sorry, they recounted the votes. They did a recount in 2020. They had their routine audit. Donald Trump went to court several times. Trump allies even brought in the so-called cyber ninjas who had no experience at this. But what did the cyber ninjas determine? That yes, Arizona did undercount votes for Joe Biden. That Joe Biden got actually even more votes in Arizona than they gave him credit for. So they know what they're doing in Arizona. It's a close election. So Kari Lake has every right, as does any candidate, to wait it out to the end. I do think if she looks around the country, whether it's your Senate race just north of you in New Hampshire, whether it's the Trump-backed candidate who was the Republican candidate for governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, come down to Maryland, go to Pennsylvania, go to Michigan, make your way across the country. These election deniers got their butts kicked in most of the big races. And if Kari Lake wants to run again, she should really think about that.
We're talking with John King from CNN. John, what's going to happen with the House? I mean, they're closing in now on the majority in the House. There's a very slim majority of Republicans in the House. But I wonder, is there any room for the moderates, or is it going to be, Jim Jordan and Marjorie Taylor Greene, or what's going to happen?
There's a fascinating tug-of-war going on today. It begins today, and then it will continue through January. You're right. We at CNN have not called the House yet. I don't know if any other news organizations have. We still have it at 215, meaning Republicans need 3 more.
Right.
I've looked at other organizations that have it at 217. I'm not disputing their math. We're more conservative sometimes about calling some of these races. I've looked at the map. The Republicans are almost certain. There's still a mathematical possibility, but they are almost certain to have a narrow majority. Will it be 220? Will it be 221? It'll be somewhere in that ballpark, right? Somewhere in that ballpark. 218 is what you need for the majority. The Republicans could get as high as 225. I don't think it's going to get that high. I think it's going to be lower than that, but a 3 to 5 seat majority. So who should be their leader? Kevin McCarthy is the faraway favorite, but he's going to face a challenge today. And we'll learn today how many votes does Andy Biggs, the conservative from Arizona, is going to challenge him. He is not going to be the next Speaker of the House. He is not going to be the next Republican leader. He's a protest candidate. So do they just bruise Kevin McCarthy, or do they draw blood? If they draw blood, then maybe Republicans will be thinking, we're going to need 218 votes in January. And if we only have, say, 220 or 221, then they can't afford to lose more than 2 or 3, right? So that's the calculation that's going to have to happen. If you're in Vegas today and you're placing a bet, Kevin McCarthy is most likely going to be the next Speaker of the House. But we're not done. We're not done. And as I say to you guys every Tuesday, we live in such a volatile age that has been so full of surprises. Let's just watch this one play out. Republicans are mad. They think they should have had a much bigger midterm year. Is that Kevin McCarthy's fault? Is it Donald Trump's fault? You can spread the blame anywhere you want, but they're mad, and they're looking for a piñata.
John, but there's, so far at least, and we'll find out how Trump fares, assuming he declares tonight, none of the people who are responsible for I'm so sick of saying the red wave didn't materialize, but the red wave didn't materialize. Whether you blame McCarthy, the would-be speaker, McConnell, the Republican leader in the Senate, or Trump himself, none of them appear to be being held accountable by their own constituents. I don't mean voters. I mean fellow leaders, for example, which seems to be a counterintuitive behavior. I mean, Donald Trump's the most egregious example, because you say he's lost election after election after election, but how do you explain that? Why aren't one of these people, at least in the short run, paying a price?
Part of it is that no one else is organized at the moment, that they've had all this change, and that Kevin McCarthy's greatest strength is he can look around the room and say, who else? If it's not me, who else? and they look around the room, and none of you would say, yes, are there still some pragmatic governing conservatives in the House Republican caucus? People who, again, people at home might agree or disagree with them, but people who want to cut taxes, believe in smaller government, think that Obamacare has too much government power, but can we find market solutions to health care or market solutions to climate? What do we do about the border? The kind of debates we should be having in the country, whatever your views, right? Are there people like that in the Republican Party? Of course there are. Of course there are, and they're good public servants. And they want to have a policy debate. But are there enough of them to topple Kevin McCarthy, especially when the aforementioned Donald Trump is making phone calls to help his Kevin because he wants leverage over the next Speaker of the House? At the moment, there are not. Mitch McConnell's going to face a leadership challenge in the Senate as well. I suspect in the end, he's going to get bruised a little bit, but he will survive. But again, the Democrats are about to go through this in the House as well. The only guy who doesn't have to worry about it is Chuck Schumer because Democrats protected their Senate majority. All the other Senate Republicans, House Republicans, and House Democrats are going to have these leadership fights. And I talked to you guys before you guys came to GBH. We were talking about this: the ideological, the generational, the geographical pressures in both parties. Will they bubble up significantly? Will they just bubble a little bit? We're going to find that over the next few weeks. It's actually kind of fascinating.
Can I just ask one last Trump question? There were reports, I guess, a day or two ago, that in anticipation of the runoff in Georgia on December 6th, that some advisors to Herschel Walker were suggesting that if he needs help from Republicans, the person he needs help from is Ron DeSantis from the neighboring state, not his champion, Donald Trump. And there was speculation that Trump would literally murder not literally, would strangle somebody if he was put in that position after being Walker's major trumpeter. Is there any truth to that as far as you understand?
I think the Walker campaign faces a big decision about whether to invite Donald Trump in. Brian Kemp, the Republican governor who was just reelected, is not a big Herschel Walker fan, but he did just cut a deal with Mitch McConnell to sell him his turnout operation, essentially. Sell him his voter list, sell him his data file, sell him the information that Brian Kemp used to just run a very successful and very well-run reelection campaign in Georgia. Republicans say if you brought in Ron DeSantis from neighboring Florida, that he'd be a lot more popular than Donald Trump at the moment right now, because Ron DeSantis is popular with the Trump base, but he's not toxic in the suburbs, at least not yet. He's untested outside of Florida. The Republican Party, many people in the Republican Party are right now in love with Ron DeSantis, and they might well be right. I'm not saying they're wrong. I say prove it, right? Remember, after 2014, Scott Walker got reelected governor of Wisconsin, and we lived in a different age then. It was just really Fox News. It wasn't all this mega media stuff that's everywhere. But Scott Walker was, he could walk on water until he stepped out of Wisconsin in the 2016 primaries, and turned out he went underwater. So we're going to see what Ron DeSantis is made of in the months ahead if he decides to run. But at this moment, would he be a better asset for Herschel Walker than Donald Trump? A lot of smart Georgia Republicans think the answer is yes.
Just in terms of the Herschel Walker, Raphael Warnock runoff, December 6th, I believe it is. What's the difference between the Democrats having 50 and 51 person majority? I mean, what does that mean for?
It's huge.
Okay.
It means they get a majority on the committees as opposed to splitting them even 50-50, which means they get subpoena power, which means they can move legislation through the committee more easily because it can't be deadlocked by a tie vote. It sounds like it's only one vote, right? How much can that matter? It's not just that the vice president could travel more because she wouldn't have to be around to break every tie. It would give Democrats much more power and authority in the Senate in the short term, immediately, make it easier to confirm judges, make it easier if the president has a post-midterm cabinet shakeup, either some of those for political reasons, you want new people, some of those just because people are tired after 2 years. So it makes everything easier. And Margery, I think the part that gets forgotten sometimes is the 2022 map was pretty favorable to Democrats. They kept their Senate majority on a map where none of their incumbents had to run in a Trump state. All of the Democrats on the ballot in 2022 for Senate races were running in states Biden carried. That helped them a lot. The 2024 map is not so nice for Democrats. Places like Montana, places like West Virginia, back to Arizona again. Biden carried that state, but it's a tight one there. And so if you can lock up that Georgia seat for 6 years, it not only helps you tomorrow in the Senate, but it helps you in the next Senate race. Just the map is not quite so stacked against you.
And what does it mean for Joe Manchin?
Well, Joe Manchin's on the ballot in 2024. It means if you have 51 instead of 50, he's slightly less influential when you're trying to cut a deal on legislation. But I also think it's going to be fascinating to watch Joe Manchin because he's on the ballot in 2 years. How does he position himself?
Yeah.
What lessons? What does he read? Everybody, I would caution you not to accept my read or anybody's immediate read on the 2022 midterms. We've learned a lot of things. It's really going to take some time to sort through it all in detail. But I'm fascinated by people like a Joe Manchin or a Sinema, who, were difficult within the Democratic coalition, difficult to get to the table. They would argue 2022 proves they were right, that their state, especially in Arizona, that's still a really tough state. Progressives say in Arizona's case that she's wrong. Well, watching them the next 2 years will tell you a lot about what they think about American politics.
By the way, John, you're wasting your time. When you're urging careful reflection on us, forget about it. This is a jump to conclusion kind of show. Jason Tatum for MVP, quickly? Yes, right?
So far, yes, but we got a long way to go.
Well, okay. Hey, great to see you, John King. Be well.
John,
and by the way, you've been, I should have said, you've been brilliant. I mean, really brilliant and tireless. You've been great.
Tireless,
Really
that's for sure. I don't know how you do it, John. I know you've got the espresso machine going, but I have to be mainlining it at this point, I think.
I often give Boston Latin a lot of credit. It deserves a lot of credit, but the nuns at St. Mark's taught me math. They taught me math. That's all this is. It's math.
They taught you well. John King, talk to you next week. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much. We've been speaking with CNN's chief national correspondent, John King, who hosts Inside Politics weekdays at noon. We watch it every day. We thank John King for being here. Up next, it is the first really cold day around here, and it's got us talking about comfort foods that we turn to in the winter months. We're going to open the lines to hear from you. The number is 877-301-8970. You can call or text at that number. You are listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News.
Iranian government repression of protests continues with the most severe penalty possible, the death sentence. Meanwhile, President Biden addressed the world in Egypt and sat down one-on-one with China. And with the holidays approaching, we can't stop thinking about WNBA's Brittany Griner in a Russian penal colony. That's next time on The Takeaway from WNYC and PRX.
This afternoon at 2, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you. And City Year. City Year works to make a difference in the lives of students by placing AmeriCorps mentors in public school classrooms, helping students to feel supported and stay on track to graduation. More at cityyear.org. And Vantage Healthcare, providing primary care physicians throughout New England. Vantage brings their primary care team on site to assisted living communities, nursing homes, and more. Learn more at myvantagehcs.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. I'm Jim Browdy. She's Margery. And we're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News. We felt we needed a break from all this, and we're about to do it. After what felt like an embarrassingly warm start to November, we're finally in a cold snap. Some parts of New England even expected to get the first dusting of snow tonight. Actually, my windshield was frozen this morning when it came out. It's all got you too? Oh no? Oh my goodness, meaning your fake sympathy for me. Thank you. It's all got us thinking about the comfort foods we turn to in colder months. A place called Wallet Hub recently ranked clam chowder as Massachusetts' top comfort food.
Really?
Rhode Island was something like clam cakes, and New Hampshire was apple desserts, whatever that means. I assume it means apple pie. So we want to hear from you. Do you churn out loaves of bread to heat the house until you finally cave and turn your heat on? Or are you more of an Annie's mac and cheese guilty pleasure kind of person? A family-sized box, of course, is really just enough for one person. 877-301-8970. Comfort foods are one of the great things that ever happen, and they really only do work in cold weather. So I hesitate to do this because I know you're going to say, I don't know. What is your favorite comfort food in cold?
I have an easy one. Yeah, absolutely.
What is it?
Grilled cheese. Love
grilled cheese is a really
Can't
good
get enough grilled cheese. It's really good.
Do you put anything on it? I don't even know. I should know this. Do you put anything on it besides cheese?
Yeah, lots of butter.
Butter.
Butter both sides of the bread.
Well, comfort food for you is like a stick of butter,
yeah,
right?
It's very good. You like the butter in there. Lobster rolls in Maine, I suppose that makes sense. Clam chowder, they do say, as you said, in Massachusetts.
Ridiculous.
I was kind of surprised about that. Fried green tomatoes in Alabama.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense too. King crab legs with butter in Alaska. It's Southern Fried Chicken in Arkansas. I mean, regional things. I mean, there are things that people really love from, apparently people really love fried ravioli in Missouri, Jim.
If I knew what ravioli was,
I don't
maybe
even
I'd
know. I don't even know
enjoy
what that is. 877-301-8970. Do you have a favorite comfort food? Guess what the one is in Texas?
I would say, well, actually, I wouldn't say. What is it?
Brisket.
Is that really true?
Texas
brisket.
Well,
barbecued brisket. Well, barbecued food, I have to say, as a whole, really fits in the comfort food category,
Yeah,
does it
Tennessee,
not?
Memphis baby back ribs. I went to Nashville a couple of years ago and went to Memphis as well. And boy, the barbecue stuff and the cornbread and the chitlins and all that kind of
Well,
stuff.
can I tell you, there's some really good barbecue in this town, too. I know Callie Cross, they would tell us that's not true because she's a Tennessee
She's from
kid.
Memphis, Tennessee.
But I think there's some pretty good places, too. Sweet Cheeks. Smoke Shop.
Very good.
There's some really,
the biscuits at Sweet Cheeks.
Oh my God, they're good for you too. By the way, they only have like 3,000 calories per biscuit.
I don't
It's really
think,
great.
I don't think they're that fattening.
They are the most fattening thing.
But you can go down there, you can buy a dozen frozen, then you can take them home and eat them, cook them like.
And by the way, you know what they do, which is really nice when you buy a dozen? They give you a car to go right to the emergency room at Mass General. You eat them on the way, and then you're admitted, which is there's no beds, unfortunately,
really, that's
but
good.
you can really do
I made
that.
it because one weekend that's all I ate. I ate
it is literally
all
like
day.
And that's not, I mean,
with honey butter.
Yeah, I mean, we love Tiffany Faison, and it's a fabulous restaurant, but it's like a stick of butter in each one of them. 877-301-8970. Oh, Jim, so what's your favorite comfort food?
What is your favorite comfort food,
thank you
Jim?
for asking, Margery. Shepherd's pie.
Shepherd's, that's a good
And
one.
can I tell you specifically
That's a
whose
good one.
recipe?
Yeah, I know
since
you
asked?
like Dory.
Dory Greenspan's
yep.
shepherd pie. It's very unusual. It's one of the great winter treats of all time. Really easy to make, etc. 877-301-8970. So we're a little short on time. All we want to know is what is your winter cold weather comfort food, and tell us why. Is it a kid thing? You grow up having it? You like the texture? What's the deal? Let's start in Rhode Island, speaking of. And Emma, you're on the phone. Emma, welcome.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much for taking my call.
Pleasure.
So my favorite winter food is leek risotto.
Leek risotto.
Leek risotto. Now that's fairly exotic. How'd you come up with that, Emma?
From watching Emily in Paris.
Oh my God.
Oh, that's actually pretty good.
Is that big on Emily in Paris? That's a comfort show, isn't it? Emily in Paris, wouldn't you say comfort food for a comfort show?
Plus, leek risotto is a great excuse to open a bottle of wine.
I think you've got some deep reasons there. Emma,
Okay.
Thank you for the call. We appreciate it.
Guess what Vermont's is?
I have no idea. Cheddar cheese.
No. Ben & Jerry's ice cream.
Well, I guess that makes sense.
Yeah. Utah's.
Here's a good one. Pickleball Maggie from Wayland says, hot chocolate with whipped cream in my smug mug. That is actually a pretty... I don't think the smug mug is essential, but cold weather food of the gods, says Denise from Marlborough, texting in chili and mac and cheese. Mac and cheese in your chili mac attack. Chili is also a wonderful, you know, I had great chili the other day at Flower Bakery.
Oh my God.
Are they going to be on with us? Or Myers and Chang are going to be with us. Joanne Chang and Christopher Myers are going to join us on Friday, by the way, at the library.
They have there.
Fabulous.
I went the other day and they were out of the brioche, so I got a lemon ginger scone. It was the most unbelievable thing I've ever eaten.
You know how to live, Margery.
I
Let me tell you.
I do. I live in the high life, Jim.
Beth in Hopkinton, you're next on Boston Public Radio. We're talking comfort foods. What's yours, Beth?
Hey, first off, I have to say, first-time caller, and I absolutely am crazy about you guys. So
Thank you. So nice, and thanks for your first call.
As soon as the heat went on this morning, I started making my Swedish cardamom bread, which is a braid that my mom made. The whole process is entirely cathartic, and the house smells great. And then there's also Swedish rye bread, and I'm right there with you, Margery. Nothing like a grilled cheese, and especially a grilled cheese on homemade rye.
Oh yeah, homemade bread. That's one of the best things
Homemade
of all
rye
time.
is
When you can
particularly
smell
great.
it cooking in the oven, Beth, isn't that the best?
Oh, it's just amazing. And this is my, I make the Swedish rye bread in a bread pail that is from the 1920s. It actually won a prize at the World Fair way back when. So it's a tradition that goes on and on and on. No, and it's
I love
just,
that.
My kids fight over it. I'm sending my bread all over the country.
Hey, Beth, send us one, Beth. One Guest Street, Brighton, Massachusetts. We'd love one. Beth, thanks for the call. You know what's interesting about Beth? That's what I was suggesting before. There's a historical tradition that gets her into the joy of that particular food. By the way, it is true. I know it's not a comfort food as such, but the smell of bread baking in your house.
Oh my God!
Remember when you swallowed the bread?
Yes, I did. I ate it when it was still
rose
cooking.
in your
I thought my stomach was going to explode. I ate so much bread; it would be very embarrassing.
It's when she was living at the ashram
Co-ed
in California.
felled by loaf of bread, with butter and honey on it.
So it really did feel like your stomach was going to explode, right?
I ate so much of it. I could smell
really
it,
nice.
and
I wonder why you ate so much late at night.
I don't know why that could be.
I wouldn't know why. Go ahead.
So listen to what they do. The favorite in Nevada is
what?
Hotel buffets, because they have all the casinos out there. And you can go there and just stuff yourself at the buffets there.
Can I tell you something? If they had beds next to buffets, I'd be sleeping in them. There is nothing. By the way, I hadn't even thought of that. But since you can choose what you want, a buffet, depending on the quality of the buffet, is what a great choice for comfort food.
John from Northbridge, thanks for calling.
Hey, John.
Hey, I'd like to shout out to my wife's paella.
Oh, that's a good one.
That's a great one.
That's a great one.
Tell us about it.
Yep. Well, she hails from Spain, so it's authentic. You get your shrimp, fish, clams, rice. It's just heaven. Heaven on a plate.
You know what I love? One of my favorite, I don't know if it's expression's the right word, but when people say like you did, John, I love this. You have your basic clams, your calamari. Well, I love that use of that word. You were in that. I had paella a couple of weeks ago at Ostra around the corner from here.
La-di-da.
No, I didn't mean, I knew you'd do that. I can't say anything with you. They were going to be on TV with me.
When Jim does, he's got this grift going on this television show.
It's not a grift.
Every other week he invites.
No, they bring food to the studio.
That's right.
But I pay in the restaurant.
No,
Don't start with this, by the way.
I'm not saying you're not paying the restaurant. I'm saying he's got this new thing. We're on his TV show. He has people on with food. Great restaurant.
You know why I do that? Hey, John, that was a great call.
People see him going out to the parking lot
I wonder
with
why
big...
Maybe I do. It's a service to the damn viewers.
That's right.
You know what those restaurants were, Margery?
Yeah, he's for
free. It was
free
Sarma,
for like 2 weeks.
Nightshade Noodle Bar in Lane.
Yep.
What do they have in Ostra? What do they have in common?
They're great restaurants.
Five-star reviews
that's
in
right.
the Boston Globe, and that's why we
when
did it.
When Jim's going to get a restaurant on his show, it's only going to be a 5-star. That's for sure.
And it is true they brought free food. That had something to do with the invitation.
And if you watch Jimmy, this is fabulous.
PJ, okay, fine. I'm moving on, Margery. Thank you for the criticism. PJ on YouTube, this is a good one. A classic beef stew with garlic toast. Beef stew with thick gravy around it.
I'm getting
is a really big
hungry
comfort
having this
kind
discussion.
of thing. Well, we have the Newsfeed Cafe at 2 o'clock.
Ron from Seabrook, what do you think, Ron?
Hey, Ron, what's your deal?
Hi. You know, I really love shepherd's pie, but if you make it with Mexican seasonings and instead of potatoes on top, you put cornbread batter.
Ooh.
It's top, really, really delicious.
Well, I love cornbread. That actually sounds spectacular. Ron, thanks for the little variation on a theme. That's great.
Did you read the one? The guy?
I did. I just read it.
Okay, I just want to make sure you
Beef
read
stew.
that because
Thank
that's a
you,
really
yeah.
good one. Beef stew. That's
Are you
absolutely
paying attention
great.
to the show or not?
Well, I was reading the emails,
Yeah, okay,
Jim,
got
or the
it.
text messages, whatever
Yeah,
they are.
whatever they are.
Listen to this one. This is unusual. In a big snowstorm, says Kim from Foster, fried clams because it brings summer back.
Well, fried clams are great. Unfortunately, the big battle is between, do you know the difference, because you don't eat fish, between a big-bellied clam and a clam strip? Do you know what that is?
Yeah, you want the real clam.
You want the real deal.
Clam
but most people do the clam strip thing, which doesn't make it for me, you know?
I get it, Jim. I understand.
You ever had a fried clam in your whole life?
Yes, I have.
I don't think so.
I have.
Look me in the eyes and
no,
say,
I have.
When was the last time you had a fried clam?
In the summertime.
I don't think
Every
so.
once in a while I get a fried clam. They're not bad. Fried clams are okay.
Oh, this is good. This is a texter. It says their favorite food, I agree, comfort food. This is for Jared. Is he still here? No. Is Campbell's soup licked off a Van Gogh painting? That's...
Oh, do you read? The text came in, too. My
fun,
love to the climate protesters from my art studio in Boston. So there's somebody
let's hope
down.
Jared's not listening. This really puts him over the edge.
Is Jared over there? I think he's gone.
He
Philip
is.
in Boston, what do you think, Philip?
Hey, Philip, what's up?
Hey, so long-time listener, first-time caller.
Love that.
I would say Chinese hot pot.
Oh, you are... Explain what hot pot is for those who don't know. It is one of the most fun meals in addition to tasting great. Explain what it is.
Oh, yeah. So hot pot is like a family soup where there's a big pot in the middle and you have all these raw ingredients, vegetables, thin sliced meat, any kind of protein you want. And then you could also have seafood and, you'll put clams in there if you want.
And you cook it.
And then you can just and you cook it. It cooks right in front of you. You can choose the doneness. You can pick it up early if you want your vegetables a little crisp.
I'm with you.
Or
That's
you
a
can cook
great
it a little
choice.
longer. Yeah.
And they're all different kinds of broths you can get, from spicy to mild. And then they slice the meat and stuff really thin so that you dump it into the broth and it cooks in a matter of seconds. That's a brilliant suggestion, Philip. Thanks for making it.
We got some great one from the texters. Noodle kugel, our Aunt Flora's favorite recipe.
I'm not a big kugel fan.
Feta baked in phyllo, drizzled with honey and sesame
That's pretty
seeds.
good too, yeah.
That's from Jean in Derry, New Hampshire. Jim's texter
I'm
says,
Jim.
Marianne and Beverly want you to know that they make impossible shepherd's pie for Thanksgiving using impossible meat. I don't know. And Dave from Belmont says, homemade biscuits like my grandmother taught me with the sausage,
That's
gravy.
also good.
And somebody else says, nothing competes with a cup of hot mulled apple cider. That's
Okay,
a good
this
one,
person
too.
says, hi, Jim. I enjoy roasting a pot roast with onions, celery, carrots, potatoes, and a rich oatmeal stout. I was going to cook one in celebration of Carrie Lake's highly anticipated presidential run, but that really didn't work out. Did it, Jim?
Yeah.
John in Marblehead. That's a
People who don't
prediction that
know,
will never live down.
Yeah, he was predicting that Carrie Lake would be the next president of the United
I did
States.
predict that.
But she could be the next vice president of the United States. She could be running with
She
Donald
could
Trump.
be running with Trump.
You
It's
just
true.
never
That's
know.
by the way, there's a real good chance that he would pick her.
Well,
don't
he'd
you
love
think?
her. He'd love her because she's good looking, she's telegenic, she's got the whole TV thing going.
And she's a total sycophant, which obviously he loves more than anything else. We only have 30 seconds. And Emily in Taunton, it's yours. Welcome.
Hi, my favorite is homemade matzo ball soup.
Oh,
that's
that is
a good
brilliant
one.
suggestion.
That is a good one. Or chicken soup in general. I love chicken
But
soup
Emily,
in
do you
general.
do the matzo balls that are like a rock, or do you the light, fluffy kind of deal? What's your deal?
Somewhere in between.
Okay, well, you got to think about it for a couple of minutes. I know.
And hard. So I kind of do it in the medium, somewhere in between.
Well, anytime you want to send a matzo ball our way, feel free. Thank you for calling, and enjoy it. We're out of time.
We're out of time, but we didn't get to Kevin, but he wanted spaghetti and meatballs. That's a really good one,
That's a
Kevin.
good one, too, actually.
Pepperoni rolls. That's from Jared in Mansfield. That's a really good one, too. And we got a bunch of them on text, but I can't get to them all. Jim is the actual Phantom from the Phantom Gourmet. That's what one of the texters thinks. Jim, do you have anything to say about that?
No, we actually haven't. We haven't even seen the Andelmans in ages, have we? The
No,
real
we've
Phantom
not.
Gourmet people.
Okay, thank you for listening to another edition of Boston Public Radio. You can keep up with us 24/7 by way of our podcast, which is, of course, called Boston Public Radio. Tomorrow, we're going to be joined by Boston Globe business columnist Shirley Leung, national security expert Juliet Kayyem, former Massachusetts Secretary of Education Paul Revell, naturalist and author Cy Montgomery, and Ryan Landry of the Gold Dust Orphans, ahead of his show Little Christmas Tree Shop of Horrors, which we're all going to see in December.
Who's featured in that show in addition to the Gold Dust Orphans?
You and I.
You and I.
Yeah,
That
I'm
is
very
correct.
excited about that. I want to thank our crew, Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Mackenzie Farkas, Gia Orsino, Brendan Deedy. Our engineer is John the Claw Parker. Our executive producer is Jamie Bologna. And special thanks to our BPL team, Angelica Marrero, Colin Cockrell, and Steve Baracci. What's on TV tonight?
A couple of things. The Boston Club is out with its 20th anniversary survey of women and people of color on boards of directors of big corporations and in the C-suites. There's some progress. We'll talk to the authors behind that. And Michelle Singletary, who we all love from
Oh
the
my
Washington
God,
Post.
love her.
Dan Primack, love him too, from Axios. Are going to talk about all the layoffs, particularly in the tech industry, what it means, what's the economic impact, what's the human impact, all that kind of stuff. That's tonight at 7 o'clock on Greater Boston.
Sounds excellent, Jim,
Well,
as
thank
always.
you so much.
I'm Marjorie Egan.
And I am Jim Browder.
Thank you so much for tuning in today.
And thank you all
people
for
that
coming.
came
We
down
appreciate it.
to the Boston Public Library. Hope you have a great day and hope you can tune in tomorrow. Bye.